Mara Quinn didn't know her wedding dress was actually a ransom payment until she saw the look in her father's eyes. Relief, not joy. The man waiting at the altar, Luca DeSantis, wasn't a groom. He was a collector. By the time the ceremony ended and armed men escorted her into a bulletproof limousine, Mara understood. She'd just been sold to the most dangerous crime boss in the city, and the honeymoon suite waiting for her was nothing more than a beautiful prison. If you want to see how Mara survives her first night as a mobster's unwilling bride, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The church smelled like lilies and lies. Mara Quinn stood at the back of the sanctuary in a wedding dress she'd never wanted, staring down an aisle lined with strangers. Not one familiar face smiled back at her. Not one friend from college. Not one cousin from her mother's side. Just rows of men in expensive suits with hard eyes and harder expressions, watching her like she was merchandise being delivered. And at the altar, waiting with the patience of a predator, stood Luca DeSantis. She'd seen his photograph once, 2 weeks ago, when her father finally explained what he'd done. Patrick Quinn had gambled away more than money this time. He'd bet his daughter's future and lost spectacularly. The debt came due in the form of a man whose name made people cross the street, whose business interests included everything the law forbade, whose reputation was built on bodies that disappeared without a trace. Luca DeSantis didn't need to raise his voice to make the city go quiet. He just had to exist. Now Mara was supposed to marry him. "You're shaking." Her father's voice came from beside her, low and urgent. Patrick Quinn looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by fear and desperation. "Stop it. You'll embarrass me." Mara's hands clenched around the bouquet of white roses someone had thrust at her an hour ago. "Embarrass you? You sold me to a gangster to cover your debts, and you're worried about embarrassment? Keep your voice down." Patrick's grip tightened on her arm, fingernails digging through the lace sleeve. "This is the only way. You don't understand how much I owed them, what they would have done to you." Mara turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw nothing but a coward wrapped in a rented tuxedo. "What they would have done to you, so you traded me instead." "It's just a marriage," Patrick hissed. "Women have made worse sacrifices. You'll have money, security, protection. I'll have a cage. Better a cage than a casket." Patrick's eyes darted toward the front of the church, where Luca stood utterly still, watching them with the focused attention of a shark scenting blood in the water. "He's waiting. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The organ music swelled, drowning out whatever Mara might have said next. She felt the eyes of every person in that church fix on her, measuring, judging, calculating her value like she was currency changing hands. Because that's exactly what she was. Patrick pulled her forward, and Mara's feet moved automatically, muscle memory from a childhood of doing what she was told, being the good daughter, keeping the peace. Each step down that aisle felt like walking toward her own execution. The dress, heavy silk and antique lace that probably cost more than her entire year's salary as a graduate student, suddenly felt suffocating. Luca's eyes never left her face. Up close, he was worse than his photograph. Not worse looking, no, that was the problem. Luca DeSantis was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all clean lines and deadly purpose. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Renaissance sculptures, angular and aristocratic. Eyes so dark they looked black in the church's dim lighting, framed by lashes that would have made him pretty, if not for the absolute absence of warmth in his gaze. He wore his tuxedo-like armor, perfectly tailored, probably Italian, definitely worth more than her father's car. A thin scar traced his left cheekbone, the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless presentation. His hands, when he reached for hers, were strong and calloused, working hands, despite the manicure and expensive watch. Killer's hands. The priest began speaking in a voice that trembled slightly. Smart man. He knew what Luca was, knew that mistakes in this ceremony might be measured in blood instead of awkward apologies. Mara barely heard the words. Her entire world had narrowed to the feeling of Luca's fingers wrapped around hers, warm and unbreakable. "Repeat after me," the priest said, and Mara realized with distant horror that they'd reached the vows already. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Luca's thumb traced a slow circle against her palm, a gesture that might have seemed tender if not for the warning pressure behind it. "Say the words, Mara." His voice was silk over steel, educated and refined, with just a trace of an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. Or something older, something inherited through generations of men who'd built empires in shadows. Mara swallowed hard. I don't want this. Silence crashed through the church like a physical thing. The priest actually took a step backward. Somewhere in the pews, someone cleared their throat nervously. Luca's expression didn't change. I know. Then let me go. No. One word, absolute, final, delivered without anger or malice, just simple fact. You can't force me to. I can. Luca's fingers tightened fractionally on hers, just enough to make his point. Your father's debt transferred to you the moment you walked through those doors. You can say the vows willingly, or I can have Marco hold a gun to your father's head while you say them. Either way, this ceremony ends with you as my wife. Mara's gaze snapped to the front pew, where her father sat ashen-faced between two men who definitely weren't there for the open bar. One of them, Marco presumably, smiled at her. It wasn't a friendly expression. That's not a choice, Mara whispered. Welcome to my world. Luca turned back to the priest. Continue. The vows passed in a blur. Mara heard herself speaking, heard words like honor and cherish turn to ash in her mouth. When Luca slid the ring onto her finger, platinum, heavy, studded with diamonds that caught the candlelight like trapped stars, she felt the weight of it like a shackle. You may kiss the bride. Luca leaned in slowly, giving her time to see it coming, to understand that even this, even a kiss, was something he would take because he could. His lips brushed hers with surprising gentleness, a contrast to everything else about this nightmare. The kiss lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to seal the deal, short enough to make it clear that tenderness was a tool, not a feeling. When he pulled back, Luca's eyes held something that might have been satisfaction. Mrs. DeSantis. The name hit her like a slap. The church erupted in polite applause that sounded more like a threat than celebration. Luca tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and turned her toward the aisle, toward the doors, toward whatever waited beyond. Mara caught one last glimpse of her father, saw him mouth, "I'm sorry," like that could possibly matter now. Then they were moving, Luca's stride confident and unhurried, Mara struggling to keep pace in heels she hadn't chosen, and a dress that suddenly felt like a shroud. The church doors opened onto late afternoon sunlight that seemed too bright, too normal for what had just happened. A limousine waited at the curb, black, armored, with tinted windows so dark Mara couldn't see inside. 2 men in suits flanked the vehicle, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. They straightened when Luca appeared, eyes scanning the street with professional paranoia. In, Luca said, opening the door himself. Mara looked at the limousine, at the interior that screamed money and power and absolute control, and felt something inside her rebel. Where are we going? The Roosevelt Hotel, presidential suite. Luca's hand settled on the small of her back, applying just enough pressure to guide her forward. I own the top 3 floors. Security is excellent. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable. Mara laughed, a sound that came out sharp and broken. You mean locked up? Semantics. Luca's patience, which had been impressive up until now, showed its first crack. Get in the car, Mara. We can discuss your concerns in private. My concerns? She spun to face him, wedding dress twisting around her legs. You just forced me to marry you to pay off my father's debt, and you want to discuss my concerns? The street went silent. Mara realized with creeping horror that people had stopped to watch, pedestrians frozen on the sidewalk, drivers slowing their cars, everyone suddenly fascinated by the scene unfolding outside the church. Luca noticed too. His jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign of irritation before his mask of control slammed back into place. He leaned in close, voice dropping to a murmur only she could hear. You're making a scene. That reflects poorly on both of us. Get in the car willingly, or I will put you in. Choose. You keep giving me choices that aren't really choices. Then you're starting to understand how this works. Luca straightened, held out his hand. Come, wife. Our guests are waiting. Something in the way he said wife, like a title, like a possession, like a fact of nature that couldn't be changed, made Mara's resistance crumble. She looked at the watching crowd. At the church behind her where her father was probably already negotiating his freedom. At Luca standing there with infinite patience and absolutely no mercy. She took his hand and let him guide her into the limousine. The interior was exactly as excessive as she'd expected. Leather seats, minibar, privacy partition raised between them and the driver. The door closed with a solid, expensive thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling. Locks engaged automatically. Luca settled into the seat across from her, legs crossed, utterly relaxed now that he'd gotten his way. Better. Mara pressed herself against the opposite door, as far from him as the space allowed. How long? How long what? How long do I have to stay married to you? Until the debt is paid? Until my father earns enough to buy me back? She hated the desperate hope in her voice, but couldn't quite suppress it. There has to be an end date. Luca reached for the minibar, pulled out a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Mara's monthly rent. He poured 2 glasses with steady hands. There's no end date. That's not fair. Fair? Luca handed her a glass, which she didn't take. He shrugged and set it on the seat beside her. Your father owed me $2 million. He couldn't pay. He offered you as alternative compensation. I accepted. The debt is cleared, but the agreement is permanent. You can't just keep a person. I can. I did. You signed papers this morning before the ceremony. Prenuptial agreements, power of attorney, beneficiary designations, all legal, all binding. Luca sipped his wine, watching her over the rim. You're mine now, Mara. That doesn't expire. The limousine started moving, pulling away from the church with smooth acceleration. Mara watched the building recede through the tinted window, watched her old life disappear block by block. Why me? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. My father must have had other things to offer. Property, connections, something besides his daughter. He did. I took those too. Luca set his glass aside, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. But you're what interested me. Why? You're beautiful, educated. You come from a respectable family, despite your father's failures. You have no criminal record, no scandalous past, no ties to rival organizations. In short, you make an excellent wife for a man in my position. You mean I'm good camouflage? Mara's hands clenched in her lap, wrinkling the silk dress. Respectable window dressing for a criminal. Yes, Luca didn't bother denying it. Also, you have no one who will come looking for you, no one with the power or resources to challenge me if you disappear into my world. Your mother's dead. Your father just sold you. You have no siblings. You're perfect. But the clinical assessment of her isolation made Mara's throat tight. I have friends, graduate students, colleagues, people who will send concerned texts for a week, maybe 2, before moving on with their lives. Luca's eyes were pitiless. I've had you investigated, Mara. Very thoroughly. You're alone. That's why your father was able to offer you. That's why I accepted. The limousine turned onto a wider street, buildings growing taller and more expensive as they headed toward the heart of the city's luxury district. Mara recognized the neighborhood. She'd walked past the Roosevelt Hotel once, years ago, marveling at the doormen in their braided uniforms and the marble facade that screamed old money and older power. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now? Luca settled back into his seat, utterly comfortable in this rolling fortress. Now we go to our hotel. We have dinner, a private celebration with key members of my organization. They'll want to meet you, assess you, see if you're worth the trouble I went through to acquire you. Acquire? Mara tasted the word like poison. Like I'm furniture. Like your family. Luca's correction was gentle but firm. My wife. That position comes with certain expectations. You'll need to learn them quickly, and if I refuse, then you'll learn them slowly and painfully instead. Luca pulled out his phone, began scrolling through messages with the casual attention of a man discussing lunch plans instead of threats. I prefer cooperation, Mara, but I don't require it. You can make this easy or difficult. The outcome is the same either way. The hotel appeared ahead, all Art Deco elegance and guarded entrances. The limousine pulled into a private garage, barriers lifting automatically to grant them access. Mara watched the street disappear as they descended into underground levels where armed men patrolled between expensive vehicles. Last chance, Luca said as the car stopped. Play the role of the happy bride, smile at my associates, and the evening will pass smoothly. Fight me, and I'll have to correct your behavior in front of them. That would be embarrassing for you. It's already embarrassing, Mara shot back. I'm wearing a wedding dress I didn't choose, married to a man I don't know, being paraded in front of criminals like a trophy. How much worse could it get? Luca's smile was thin and sharp. Let's not find out. The door opened. Cool garage air rushed in, carrying the smell of concrete and exhaust. Luca stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand like a gentleman, like this was a normal evening with a normal couple. Mara looked at that extended hand and understood that this was a test. Everything from now on would be a test. She took his hand and let him pull her from the limousine. The garage was full of people, men in suits, women in evening wear, all of them stopping their conversations to watch as Luca and Mara appeared. The attention was immediate and total, dozens of eyes tracking their movement like wolves watching prey. Everyone, Luca announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. Meet my wife. A ripple of polite applause, cold and assessing. Mara felt herself being evaluated, catalogued, judged against some standard she didn't understand. The women's gazes were particularly sharp, taking in every detail of her dress, her posture, the way she stood just slightly too far from Luca. Beautiful choice, one of the men said, stepping forward with the confident ease of someone high in Luca's hierarchy. He was older, silver-haired, with a face that had seen violence and thrived on it. I'm Marco Rinaldi. We spoke at your father's negotiation, the man who'd smiled at her in the church. Mara forced herself to meet his eyes. I remember. Charming. Marco's gaze flicked to Luca. Congratulations, boss. She's got spirit. She does. Luca's hand settled possessively on Mara's waist, pulling her closer against his side, which is exactly why she needs to learn where that spirit is useful and where it's dangerous. She'll learn. I'm sure she will. Marco's smile widened. We've prepared the penthouse as you requested. Security is doubled, kitchens are ready, and the guests are arriving upstairs. Excellent. Luca guided Mara toward the private elevator, his entourage falling into formation around them like a military escort. Let's not keep them waiting. The elevator was all mirrors and brass, reflecting Mara's image back at her from every angle. She looked like a bride from a magazine. Perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect makeup. Courtesy of the stylist who'd been waiting at her apartment that morning with instructions from Luca. She looked nothing like herself. The elevator climbed with silent efficiency, numbers ticking past. 5, 10, 15, 20. The Roosevelt Hotel had 25 floors. They didn't stop until they reached the penthouse level, where the doors opened onto a private foyer that screamed wealth and exclusivity. More people waited here, glasses of champagne in hand, conversations pausing as Luca and Mara stepped out. The penthouse itself was visible through massive glass doors, a sprawling space of modern luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked sculptural and uncomfortable, art on the walls that was probably worth more than most people made in a lifetime. And everywhere, scattered throughout the space like landmines in a garden, were members of Luca's organization. Smile, Luca murmured in her ear. You're the guest of honor. Mara forced her lips to curve upward, a smile that felt like it might crack her face. Luca led her into the penthouse, into the heart of his world, and she felt the walls of her cage lock into place with every step. A woman approached, tall, elegant, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Mara's entire education. Luca, darling, she's lovely. Her gaze raked over Mara with the precision of a jeweler examining a stone. Such a sweet face. I'm Valentina Rossi. I handle the family's legitimate business interests. Nice to meet you, Mara managed. Is it? Valentina's smile was all teeth. We'll see. Come, let me introduce you to the wives. They're dying to meet you. Before Mara could protest, she was pulled away from Luca's side and guided toward a cluster of women who watched her approach with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. The wives apparently were a force unto themselves. Ladies, Valentina announced, this is Mara Quinn DeSantis, Luca's new acquisition. Acquisition. Not wife, not partner, acquisition. The women closed in, all air kisses and appraising looks, questions delivered like tiny knives wrapped in pleasantries. Where did she go to school? What did she study? Had she always known she'd marry into the family? What did her father do for a living? That last question came from a redhead in emerald silk, and Mara saw the trap too late. Admitting her father was a gambling addict who'd sold her to cover his debts would mark her as weak, as someone without value beyond her use as a pawn. He's in consulting, Mara lied, keeping her voice steady. How vague. The redhead, someone had introduced her as Gianna, wife to one of Luca's captains, smiled like a cat with cream. What kind of consulting? The kind that's none of your business. The words were out before Mara could stop them, sharp and defensive, exactly the wrong tone for this crowd. The wives went silent, shock and amusement warring on their faces. Valentina laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Oh, she's got claws. I like her. Luca usually prefers them more docile, Gianna said, eyebrows raised. This should be entertaining. From across the room, Mara felt Luca's gaze find her, felt his attention focus with laser precision despite the conversation he was having with Marco and two other men. He'd heard the exchange. He was watching to see what she'd do next. I'm not here to entertain you, Mara said, meeting Gianna's eyes directly. I'm here because I married Luca. That's all you need to know. Defensive. Gianna's smile turned cruel. That's what happens when you marry above your station. You feel like you have to prove yourself worthy. And what's your station? Mara shot back. Trophy wife to a man who needs his boss's permission to breathe? The temperature in the conversation dropped by 20 degrees. Gianna's face went hard, her hand tightening around her champagne flute. Valentina stepped smoothly between them. Ladies, let's remember we're all family here. Mara is new. She's still learning how things work. Give her time to adjust before you tear her apart. Of course. Gianna's smile was poison wrapped in civility. All the time she needs. We're very patient. The implicit threat hung in the air like smoke. Mara realized with sinking certainty that she'd just made an enemy among the wives, and in Luca's world, that probably meant something far more dangerous than petty social drama. Across the room, Luca excused himself from his conversation and crossed the space with purposeful strides. The crowd parted for him automatically, respect and fear creating a wake. He reached Mara's side and slid his arm around her waist, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a claim of ownership. How are you getting along with the ladies? He asked, voice pleasant but eyes sharp. Wonderfully, Valentina answered for her. Your wife has spirit, Luca. She'll fit right in once she understands the hierarchy. I'm sure she will. Luca's fingers pressed into Mara's side, a subtle reminder of control. Mara is very adaptable. Aren't you, darling? The endearment sounded like a warning. Very, Mara agreed through clenched teeth. Excellent. Luca guided her away from the wives toward the windows where they could speak with the illusion of privacy. You're making enemies. That's not strategic. They started it. I don't care who started it. Luca's voice stayed low and controlled, but there was steel beneath the silk. In this world, Mara, perception is everything. You're my wife. That makes you an extension of me. When you snap at Gianna Marchetti in front of witnesses, you make me look weak, like I can't control my own household. I'm not your employee. You're worse. You're my wife. That means your behavior reflects on me directly. Luca turned her to face him, hands on her shoulders, expression serious. I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't choose this, but you're here now, and you need to learn the rules if you want to survive. Survive? Mara laughed bitterly. You keep talking like I'm in danger. You are. Constantly. You're married to one of the most powerful men in the city. That makes you a target for everyone who wants to hurt me, control me, or replace me. Every person in this room is calculating your value right now, as leverage, as weakness, as opportunity. Luca's grip tightened. The only thing keeping you safe is me. So when I tell you to smile and play nice with the wives, it's not a suggestion. It's survival. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to fight back, but the absolute certainty in Luca's eyes stopped her. He believed what he was saying. More than that, he knew it to be true from experience. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. For tonight? Smile, nod. Let me handle the conversations. Don't engage with anyone who baits you. Luca released her shoulders, smoothed down the fabric of her dress like he was gentling a nervous horse. Tomorrow, we'll start your real education. But tonight, just get through it without making more enemies. A server appeared with champagne. Luca took 2 glasses, handed one to Mara. She accepted it automatically, grateful for something to do with her hands. A toast, Luca announced, raising his glass toward the room. Conversation stopped. Every eye turned to them. To new beginnings, to family, to the future of our organization. The room echoed the toast, glasses raised, champagne flowing. Mara lifted her glass to her lips and pretended to drink, pretended to smile, pretended that she was anywhere but here, trapped in silk and diamonds and impossible circumstances. The evening crawled past in a blur of faces and names she wouldn't remember, small talk that felt like interrogations, food she couldn't taste through the anxiety coating her throat. Luca kept her close, one hand always on her waist, her back, her arm, marking his territory with casual possessiveness. By the time the last guest filtered out, leaving only Luca's inner circle for what he called family business, Mara was exhausted from maintaining the facade. She sank into a chair while the men gathered around the dining table, pulling out cigars and expensive whiskey, settling into the comfortable rhythm of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. Now then, Marco said, lighting his cigar with a gold lighter, let's discuss the Costello situation. Mara's attention sharpened despite her fatigue. She knew that name, Vincent Costello, a rival crime boss who'd been in the news recently for suspected involvement in a warehouse fire that killed 3 people. He's testing boundaries, one of the other men said. Moving product through our territory without permission, it's disrespectful. It's more than disrespectful. Luca's voice was cold. It's a direct challenge. He thinks my marriage has made me distracted, vulnerable. He's wrong. So we send a message? Marco asked. We send his lieutenant back to him in pieces. Luca took a slow sip of whiskey. Make it clear that territory violations have consequences. I want Costello to understand that I'm not too busy enjoying my honeymoon to defend what's mine. The casual discussion of dismemberment made Mara's stomach turn. She must have made some sound because Luca's gaze found her across the room, sharp and assessing. Mara. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the conversation like a blade. Come here. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to stay in her chair, to not get any closer to this discussion of violence and territory and consequences. But the weight of attention from every man in that room, men who could probably kill her without breaking a sweat, got her moving. She crossed to Luca's side and he pulled her down onto his lap, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mara stiffened, but his arm locked around her waist, holding her in place. Gentlemen, Luca said, my wife needs to understand our business. She's family now. No secrets. Marco raised an eyebrow. You sure that's wise, boss? She's still an outsider. She's my wife. That makes her an insider. Luca's tone allowed no argument. Continue. The discussion resumed and Mara was forced to sit there, perched on Luca's lap like some medieval lord's property, while they planned murder with the same casual efficiency other people used to plan dinner parties. Locations were debated, methods were discussed, witnesses were considered and dismissed. Through it all, Luca's hand stayed on her hip, thumb tracing absent patterns through the silk of her dress, a reminder that she belonged to him now, that this violence and power and calculated cruelty was her new reality. The Costello lieutenant will be at the shipping yard tomorrow night, Marco said, reading from his phone. We can take him there, clean, quick, send the body back wrapped like a present. Perfect. Luca's hand tightened fractionally on Mara's hip. Make it memorable. I want Costello to lose sleep over this. The meeting wrapped up after midnight. The men filtered out, each one nodding respectfully to Luca, eyeing Mara with varying degrees of curiosity and speculation. Marco was the last to leave. Congratulations again, boss, he said at the door. She's beautiful. Just make sure she understands. I'll handle my wife, Luca interrupted. You handle Costello. When the door finally closed behind Marco, leaving them alone in the massive penthouse, the silence felt suffocating. Mara scrambled off Luca's lap, putting distance between them, suddenly very aware that they were alone. Truly alone. for the first time since the ceremony. The bedroom is through there, Luca said, pointing toward a hallway she hadn't noticed earlier. Master suite. Your things have already been brought up. My things? Mara frowned. What things? Clothes, toiletries, everything from your apartment. Luca stood, rolled his shoulders like he was working out tension. I had it all moved this afternoon while we were at the ceremony. You emptied my apartment without asking me? I own it, Luca said simply. I bought the building last week. Seemed easier than dealing with your lease. The casual admission of how thoroughly he'd taken over her life made Mara's hands shake. Is there anything you didn't plan? Your attitude. Luca's smile was thin. That's been consistently surprising. He crossed to the bar, poured himself another whiskey. Mara watched him move, confident, controlled, completely comfortable in his power. Nothing like the man who'd stood at that altar hours ago, or maybe exactly like that man, just without the need to perform civility anymore. I'm going to bed, Mara announced, heading toward the hallway he'd indicated. Mara? She stopped but didn't turn around. We need to discuss sleeping arrangements, Luca said. Ice flooded Mara's veins. What about them? There's only one bed. King size. Very comfortable. We'll be sharing it. No. The word came out sharp and immediate. Absolutely not. It's our wedding night. I don't care. Mara spun to face him, fear and fury warring in her chest. You forced me to marry you. You can't force me to... I'm not going to touch you. Luca's interruption was calm, almost gentle. Not tonight. Not until you're ready. But we will share a bed because anyone with access to this penthouse, cleaning staff, security, family members, needs to believe this is a real marriage. That means sharing a bedroom. I can sleep on the couch. You can sleep in the bed, Mara. I won't touch you. You have my word. Your word, Mara laughed, the sound coming out brittle. Why would I trust anything you say? Because I've been honest with you from the start. Luca set down his glass, met her eyes directly. I told you this was a business arrangement. I told you that you're mine now. I told you that I expect cooperation. I haven't lied to you once, and I'm not lying now. You're safe from me tonight. Safe? Mara tested the word, found it lacking. I'm not safe anywhere near you. Then I suppose you'll have to get used to danger. Luca headed toward the hallway, pausing beside her. Coming? Or would you prefer to sleep standing in the living room? Mara followed because she had no other choice, because exhaustion was winning over fear, because some part of her, the part that had studied criminal psychology in her graduate program, was curious to see if he'd keep his word. The master suite was exactly as excessive as she'd expected. California king bed with silk sheets, sitting area, fireplace, and a bathroom that could have doubled as a spa. Her suitcases were indeed stacked neatly in the walk-in closet, looking small and shabby next to the built-in wardrobes and custom storage. I'll use the bathroom first, Luca said, already shrugging out of his tuxedo jacket. Unless you'd prefer, go. Mara couldn't watch him undress, couldn't handle that particular intimacy on top of everything else today had delivered. She waited until the bathroom door closed before allowing herself to collapse onto the edge of the bed, head in her hands, wedding dress pooling around her like a silk puddle. The enormity of it all crashed down, married to a stranger, surrounded by criminals, trapped in a luxury prison with no way out. Mara wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. She was too tired, too overwhelmed, too empty. The bathroom door opened and Luca emerged wearing nothing but black silk pajama pants that hung low on his hips. Mara's gaze caught on the scars decorating his torso, thin white lines, puckered circles that could only be bullet wounds, a vicious slash across his ribs that looked like it had nearly killed him. Evidence of violence survived, of a life lived in constant danger. Your turn, Luca said, heading for the bed. Mara fled to the bathroom, locked the door, and finally let herself breathe. The space was enormous, marble everywhere. Rain shower, soaking tub, heated floors. She found her toiletry bag on the counter, found the silk nightgown someone had packed for her, found herself wondering if this was all a nightmare she'd wake from. But the face staring back at her from the mirror was real. The platinum wedding band on her finger was real. The sound of Luca settling into bed on the other side of that door was real. This was her life now. Mara changed quickly, scrubbed off the makeup, took down the elaborate hairstyle that had probably taken the stylist an hour to create. When she emerged, Luca was already in bed, propped against the headboard with a book, reading glasses perched on his nose like this was the most normal evening in the world. He looked up when she entered and something flickered in his eyes. Appreciation, maybe, or calculation. "That color suits you." Mara ignored him, climbed into the far side of the bed, and pulled the covers up to her chin like armor. Luca went back to his book. "Good night, Mara." She didn't answer. The room fell into silence broken only by the whisper of turning pages. Mara lay there, rigid and tense, hyper-aware of the warm body less than 3 feet away, waiting for him to break his promise, to reach for her, to prove that his word meant nothing. But Luca just kept reading. Eventually, exhaustion won. Mara's eyes grew heavy despite her determination to stay alert. Her muscles slowly unclenched. The adrenaline that had kept her upright through the ceremony and reception finally faded. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the soft click of Luca's lamp turning off, and his voice in the darkness, quiet and absolute. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. DeSantis." Mara woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that she had no idea where she was. For 3 blissful seconds, her mind was blank, and then memory crashed back with the weight of a collapsing building, the wedding, the penthouse, Luca. She turned her head slowly, half expecting to find him watching her sleep with that predatory stillness he seemed to carry everywhere. But the other side of the bed was empty, sheets pulled tight and smooth like he'd never been there at all. The indentation in the pillow was the only evidence he'd kept his word and slept beside her without touching. Small mercies. Mara sat up, pushing hair out of her face, and tried to orient herself in the massive bedroom. Morning light turned everything golden. The silk sheets, the marble floors, the abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her graduate degree. Through the windows, the city sprawled below like a kingdom laid out for inspection, buildings catching the early sun, traffic already starting to thicken on the streets far below. She was on the 25th floor of the Roosevelt Hotel, married to a crime boss, and she had absolutely no idea what happened next. The bedroom door opened without warning. Mara grabbed the sheets instinctively, pulling them higher even though the silk nightgown covered more than most of her summer clothes. Luca stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been painted on, hair still damp from a shower, looking every inch the businessman instead of the criminal she knew him to be. "You're awake," he observed, crossing to the windows. "Good, we have a full day." "Do we?" Mara's voice came out rough with sleep and hostility. "Breakfast in 20 minutes. Dress accordingly." Luca didn't look at her, just stood there surveying his city like a general reviewing troops. Something nice, but not formal. "We're meeting with family." "I thought we did that last night." That was the outer circle. Today is the inner circle. Now he did turn, and the morning light caught the scar on his cheekbone, made it stand out stark against his skin. "My mother, specifically. She's been waiting to meet you." Dread settled in Mara's stomach like lead. "Can't this wait? No." The single word was absolute. "My mother expects us at her house in an hour. That gives you 20 minutes to get ready and 40 minutes of drive time. I suggest you hurry." He left before she could argue, pulling the door shut with a soft click that somehow felt more final than slamming it would have. Mara sat there for another 30 seconds, weighing her options. She could refuse. Stay in bed, force Luca to drag her out physically. Make this as difficult as possible. But then what? He'd proven yesterday that he had infinite patience for getting his way, and fighting him on something as simple as getting dressed seemed like a waste of whatever limited rebellion she had left in her. She pushed out of bed and headed for the walk-in closet, where her shabby suitcases looked even worse in the morning light. But when she opened them, her own clothes were gone, replaced with garments she'd never seen before. Designer labels, perfect sizes, styles that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Luca had bought her a new wardrobe. Mara wanted to rip every piece to shreds, to refuse to wear anything he'd provided, to assert some kind of independence. Instead, she pulled out a cream-colored dress that looked appropriate for meeting mothers and disappeared into the bathroom. 18 minutes later, she emerged dressed and minimally presentable. Luca was waiting in the living room, scrolling through his phone with a cup of coffee in his other hand. He looked up when she entered, gaze tracking over her appearance with the clinical assessment of someone checking a product for defects. "Better," he said. "There's coffee and pastries in the kitchen. Eat something. We're not stopping." The kitchen was commercial-grade stainless steel and marble, stocked like a restaurant. Fresh pastries sat on a platter. Croissants, pain au chocolat, something that might have been brioche. Mara's stomach growled despite everything, betraying her with its basic needs. She grabbed a croissant and the coffee Luca had apparently poured for her, drinking it black because she had no idea where he kept the cream and refused to ask. "My mother," Luca said, leaning against the counter, with that casual elegance that seemed effortless, "is traditional. She expects respect, formality, and absolute honesty. Don't try to charm her. Don't lie to her. She'll see through it immediately and hate you for the attempt." "Good to know I should just be myself," Mara said, around a bite of croissant. "That seems to be working out great so far." "Your sarcasm is noted." Luca set down his cup. "I'm serious, Mara. My mother is the matriarch of this family. Her opinion matters. If she decides you're weak or stupid or a liability, your life gets significantly harder. Harder than being sold into marriage and held prisoner in a luxury hotel?" "Yes." No hesitation. "My mother has connections and power that exist outside my control. If she takes against you, she can make your existence here miserable in ways you can't imagine. So I need you to do exactly what you did last night. Smile, be polite, and let me handle the difficult conversations." Mara wanted to argue, but the absolute seriousness in Luca's expression stopped her. He was genuinely worried about this meeting. That scared her more than anything he'd said yesterday. "What does she know about me?" Mara asked quietly. "Everything." Luca pushed away from the counter. "I don't lie to my mother. She knows your father's situation. She knows this marriage was a business arrangement. She knows you didn't have a choice. And she's okay with that? She's practical." Luca headed toward the door. "Come on, we're already running late." The elevator ride down to the garage was silent. Marco was waiting beside a different car, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and the same subtle armor plating Mara was starting to recognize. He opened the back door with a slight bow that might have been respectful or might have been mocking. "Mrs. DeSantis," he said, "you look lovely this morning." "Thank you," Mara managed, sliding into the car before Luca could touch her. She was learning to anticipate his casual possessiveness, the way his hand would find her back or her arm or her waist without asking, marking territory with every touch. Luca settled beside her, and Marco took the front passenger seat while another man Mara didn't recognize drove. The car pulled out of the garage into morning traffic that parted for them like water around a shark. "My mother lives in the old neighborhood," Luca said, watching the city slide past, "where she raised me and my sister. She refuses to move somewhere more secure, says she won't be driven from her home by threats." "Your sister?" This was the first Mara had heard of siblings. "Julia. She's in Milan, managing our European interests." Luca's expression softened fractionally. "You'll meet her eventually. She's less understanding than my mother about business marriages." The drive took them through neighborhoods that grew progressively older and more residential, away from the gleaming downtown towers into areas where buildings had history and character. The sedan finally stopped in front of a brownstone that looked like it had stood there for a century, watching the city grow up around it. "Remember," Luca said before opening the door, "be honest. Be respectful. Don't try to impress her." They climbed the front steps together, Luca's hand on Mara's lower back again, that constant reminder of ownership. But before he could knock, the door flew open to reveal a tiny woman with steel gray hair pulled into an immaculate bun and eyes that could have cut glass. "Luca." Her voice was pure Italian accent and maternal disapproval. "You're late." "5 minutes, Mama." Luca leaned down to kiss both her cheeks with obvious affection. "Traffic. Traffic." The woman's gaze shifted to Mara, and suddenly Mara understood what Luca had meant about his mother seeing through lies. Those dark eyes, so much like Luca's, cataloged everything in one sweeping glance. "So this is the girl. This is Mara," Luca said. "My wife. Mara, this is my mother, Sophia DeSantis." "Mrs. DeSantis," Mara said, offering her hand because she didn't know what else to do. Sophia ignored the hand, stepping closer to examine Mara like a painting in a gallery. She was barely 5 feet tall, but her presence filled the doorway with the kind of authority that had nothing to do with physical size. "Pretty," Sophia said finally. "Pale. You look like you never see the sun. Come inside. I won't have this conversation on my doorstep where the neighbors can hear." The interior of the brownstone was exactly what Mara expected. Old furniture kept pristine, religious icons on the walls, despite Luca's instruction to avoid mentioning faith, photographs covering every surface. Family history frozen in silver frames, documenting decades of DeSantis life. Sophia led them through to a dining room where the table was already set for 3, complete with fresh flowers and what looked like a feast prepared for a dozen people. Bread, meats, cheeses, olives, pastries, enough food to feed a small army. "Sit," Sophia commanded, and Mara sat. Luca settled beside her while Sophia took the head of the table, queenly despite her small stature. She began serving food without asking what anyone wanted, heaping plates with the efficiency of someone who'd been feeding people for decades. "So," Sophia said once they all had food in front of them, "tell me about yourself, Mara Quinn. What kind of girl marries my son?" The question was a trap. Mara could feel it. "The kind who didn't have a choice." Sophia's eyebrows rose. She glanced at Luca, who nodded slightly. "He told you I know the circumstances?" "He did." "Good. I hate liars." Sophia cut into cheese with swift, precise movements. "Your father is a weak man, a gambler, a coward. These are facts, yes?" Mara's throat tightened, but she forced out the truth. "Yes. And you? Are you weak like him?" "I don't know," Mara admitted. "I've never been tested like this before." Sophia actually smiled at that, a quick flash of approval. "Honest. That's good. Luca needs someone honest. Too many people lie to him because they're afraid." "I'm afraid of him too," Mara said quietly. "I just don't see the point in pretending otherwise." "Interesting." Sophia turned her attention to Luca. "Sophia, you like this one?" "She has potential," Luca said, like Mara wasn't sitting right there. "She's smart, educated, adapts quickly. But does she have steel?" Sophia's gaze pinned Mara again. "This life, it requires strength, not muscle, here." She tapped her temple. "Mind, will, the ability to do what's necessary even when it breaks your heart." "I don't want this life," Mara said. "Nobody asked what you want." Sophia's voice was gentle, but implacable. "You're in it now. The question is whether you'll survive it or let it destroy you." The casual assessment of destruction made Mara's hands clench in her lap. "And if I choose to fight, to leave, then you'll die." Sophia said it like she was commenting on the weather. "Either Luca's enemies will kill you to hurt him, or you'll end up in the crossfire of business you don't understand, or you'll run somewhere you think is safe and discover that nowhere is safe from this family. So my options are submit or die." "Your options," Sophia corrected, "are learn to thrive in this world or let it eat you alive. Those are very different things from submission." Mara looked at Luca, who was eating his mother's cooking with apparent unconcern, like this conversation about her survival wasn't happening 2 feet away. "Did you bring me here to have your mother threaten me?" "I brought you here," Luca said calmly, "so she could assess whether you're worth the trouble I went through to acquire you. Mama doesn't threaten. She educates." "He's right," Sophia said. "I'm telling you the truth because Luca clearly hasn't been direct enough. This marriage, it's permanent. You understand? In our family, there is no divorce. There is no annulment. There is only death." The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples of horror that spread through Mara's chest. "That's medieval. That's tradition." Sophia reached across the table, grabbed Mara's left hand before she could pull away, examined the platinum wedding band with a critical eye. "Good. He gave you his grandmother's ring. That means he takes this seriously." Mara looked down at the ring she'd barely noticed yesterday, saw it properly for the first time. Not just diamonds, but tiny rubies hidden between the stones, blood red against the platinum. A family heirloom, another chain binding her to this life. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Of course you didn't. Luca never explains things when he can just expect obedience." Sophia released Mara's hand, shot her son a look of maternal exasperation. "You're too much like your father. All action, no communication. It's a miracle you haven't driven this poor girl completely insane. It's only been 1 day, Luca said mildly. 1 day. Sophia shook her head. And you've already locked her in a hotel, paraded her in front of the family, and brought her here for inspection. When do you plan to actually talk to her? Explain how things work? I'm working on it. Work faster. Sophia turned back to Mara. Since my son is apparently incapable of basic communication, let me explain your new life. You're a DeSantis now. That name carries weight, power, fear, respect, depending on who's speaking it. It also carries responsibility. What kind of responsibility? The women in this family, we are not ornaments. We are not passive. We support our husbands, yes, but we also manage the social structures that keep this organization running. Charity events, political connections, information gathering through our networks. The wives you met last night, they control more than you realize. Mara remembered Gianna's cruel smile, Valentina's assessing gaze. They seemed more interested in tearing me apart. Of course they were. You're new, unproven, a potential weakness in Luca's armor. Sophia's expression softened fractionally. But if you prove yourself strong, capable, useful, they'll accept you. The family takes care of its own. I'm not family. I was sold here. You became family the moment you said those vows, whether you wanted to or not. Sophia stood, began clearing plates with brisk efficiency. Now, Luca has business this afternoon. You'll stay here with me. Luca's head snapped up. Mama, don't argue with me. Sophia's voice cracked like a whip. You can't keep her locked in that hotel forever. She needs to learn from someone, and clearly you're too busy planning wars with Costello to actually educate your wife, so I'll do it. This wasn't the plan. Plans change. Go. Handle your business. Mara stays with me until dinner. Sophia pointed at the door. Out. For a moment, Mara thought Luca might refuse. His jaw tightened, hands flexing like he was resisting the urge to simply take what he wanted. In this case, Mara herself. But something in his mother's expression made him back down. Fine. He stood, buttoned his jacket with sharp movements. Marco stays, security at both entrances. If anything happens, nothing will happen in my own house, Sophia said firmly. Go. Luca looked at Mara, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or calculation. Behave, he said quietly. Or what? Mara shot back. You'll punish me in front of your mother? The corner of his mouth twitched. Just try to learn something useful. Then he was gone, disappearing through the front door with Marco trailing behind. Mara heard the car engine start, pull away, fade into the background noise of the neighborhood. She was alone with Sophia DeSantis. Well, Sophia said, returning to the dining room with a fresh pot of coffee. Now we can actually talk. Without my son hovering like a nervous hawk. Mara accepted the coffee because refusing seemed pointless. What do you want to talk about? Everything. Sophia settled back into her chair. Starting with what you actually know about Luca, not the reputation, the man. What has he told you? Nothing. He's told me nothing except that I belong to him now and I need to learn the rules. Mara's frustration bled through. He treats me like property he acquired, not a person he married. That's because he doesn't know any other way. Sophia sighed and for the first time looked her age, a tired woman carrying decades of family weight. Luca's father, my husband Antonio, he raised our son to be strong, hard, uncompromising, a leader who never shows weakness, never admits doubt, never trusts anyone outside the immediate family. Sounds lonely. It is. Sophia's gaze went distant. Antonio died when Luca was 19, shot by a rival family during negotiations that went wrong. Luca watched it happen, had to take control of the organization overnight, had to prove he was strong enough to hold power despite his age. He's been fighting to maintain that control ever since. The information landed differently than Mara expected, creating a picture of Luca she hadn't considered, not just a criminal who'd bought himself a wife, but a teenager forced into violence and responsibility before he was ready. That doesn't excuse— I'm not excusing anything, Sophia interrupted. I'm explaining. Luca sees relationships as transactions because that's how he's survived. Trust is currency. Loyalty is purchased. Love is, she trailed off, shook her head. He doesn't believe in love. He believes in control. Then why marry me at all? Why not just, Mara gestured vaguely, because he needs legitimacy. A wife, children, eventually, the appearance of stability. Rivals look for weaknesses, addiction, affairs, family problems. A solid marriage removes those attack vectors. Sophia leaned forward. But here's what Luca doesn't understand yet. Appearances only work if there's something real underneath. A wife who hates him, who's plotting escape, who resents every moment, that's more dangerous than being alone. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Sophia said carefully, that you have more power here than you realize. Luca needs you to play the role convincingly. That gives you leverage, room to negotiate, space to become something more than a captive. Mara wanted to believe it, but the memory of Luca's absolute control, his casual discussions of dismemberment, his iron grip on her waist made it hard to imagine she had any power at all. He won't listen to me. Not yet, because you're still acting like a victim. Sophia's words were harsh, but not unkind. As long as you see yourself as powerless, so will he. You need to stop fighting the marriage and start fighting for position within it. I don't understand the difference. Fighting the marriage means trying to escape, refusing to cooperate, making yourself a problem he has to solve. That puts you in opposition to him, which he'll crush because he always wins confrontations. Sophia refilled their coffee cups. Fighting for position means accepting the reality of your situation and working within it to gain influence, respect, information. Becoming valuable enough that he has to consider your opinions. You're asking me to stop resisting. I'm asking you to resist smarter. Sophia's smile was sharp. The women in this family, we've survived generations of powerful men by learning to wield influence instead of force. We know things. We connect people. We smooth over problems before they become wars. That's real power, Mara, the kind Luca understands and respects. The front door opened without warning. Both women turned as Marco stepped inside, phone pressed to his ear, expression tight with tension. Mrs. DeSantis, he said to Sophia, we need to move. Now. Sophia was on her feet instantly. What happened? Costello just hit one of our warehouses. 3 dead, building torched. The boss is inbound, says to secure his wife immediately and get her back to the hotel. Mara's blood went cold. 3 dead. People killed in the war Luca had discussed so casually last night, the retaliation he'd ordered while she sat on his lap like a trophy. Go, Sophia said, grabbing Mara's arm. Marco will take you. Stay close to him. Do exactly what he says. What about you? I'm fine. This neighborhood is neutral territory, and I have my own security. You're the target now. The new wife, the easiest way to hurt Luca. Move. Marco already had his gun out, checking the street through the window. Another man appeared from somewhere in the house. Security Mara hadn't even noticed, taking position by the back door. Clear front? Marco said. Car's ready. Mrs. DeSantis, we go on 3. Mara found herself hustled through Sophia's house, through the front door, into the waiting sedan in a blur of movement and adrenaline. Marco shoved her into the back seat, climbed in after her, gun still drawn and ready. Drive, he ordered, and the car lurched into motion. Mara pressed herself into the corner, heart hammering. What's happening? Who's after me? Costello's making a statement, hitting our assets, trying to draw the boss into making mistakes. Marco's eyes scanned the street constantly, tracking every car, every pedestrian, every potential threat. You're married to Luca now. That makes you the highest value target outside the man himself. They'd kill me just to hurt him? They'd do worse than kill you. Marco's voice was flat, which is why we're not stopping until you're back in the hotel, behind security that would take an army to breach. The drive back felt 10 times longer than the trip out. Every red light an eternity, every car that got too close a potential attack. Mara watched Marco's hand stay steady on his gun, watched the driver take random turns and double backs, the kind of evasive driving she'd only seen in movies. They pulled into the hotel's underground garage with a screech of tires. More armed men waited there, surrounding the car the moment it stopped, creating a human shield between Mara and the rest of the world. Move! Move! Marco ordered, and suddenly Mara was being rushed toward the private elevator, surrounded by men with guns, feeling more like a prisoner than ever. The penthouse doors had barely closed behind her when they opened again, and Luca strode through with an expression that could have frozen fire. He crossed the space in 4 long strides, grabbed Mara's shoulders, turned her to face him while his eyes tracked over her body, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" His voice was controlled, but barely. "No, Did anyone follow you? Did Marco take precautions?" "Yes, he... Good." Luca released her, turned to Marco. "Full report." While Marco detailed their drive back in the kind of tactical language Mara couldn't quite follow, she sank onto the nearest chair and tried to process what had just happened. She'd been having coffee with Luca's mother one moment, running for her life the next. 3 people dead, a warehouse burned, all because of a power struggle she didn't understand. No tails, no suspicious vehicles, perimeter is secure," Marco was saying. "Mrs. DeSantis is safe." "For now." Luca dismissed him with a nod, waited until they were alone before turning back to Mara. "This is what I was trying to explain last night. You're not just my wife. You're leverage, a weapon someone could use against me. I didn't ask to be a weapon. And yet, here we are." Luca poured himself a drink from the bar, downed it in one swallow. "Costello burned that warehouse to prove he could hurt me. Next, he'll try for you. The wife is always the easiest target." "Then let me go." The words tumbled out before Mara could stop them. "If I'm such a liability, divorce me. Send me away. Remove the target." Luca looked at her like she'd suggested he cut off his own arm. "That's not how this works." "Why not?" "You said this was a business arrangement. Business deals end." "Not this one." Luca crossed to where she sat, loomed over her with that particular stillness that made him more threatening than shouting ever could. "You're mine, Mara. That doesn't change because it's inconvenient or dangerous. It changes when you're dead, and I'm very good at keeping what's mine alive." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, Mara felt something else stirring beneath the fear. Anger, finally, real anger, instead of just shock and helplessness. "I'm not a thing you can just keep," she said, rising to face him even though he had 6 inches of height on her. "I'm a person, with thoughts and feelings, and the right to... You have no rights here except the ones I give you." Luca's interruption was soft but absolute. "The sooner you accept that, the easier this gets. For you, maybe. For both of us." Luca's hand came up, cupped her jaw with surprising gentleness. "I know this is hard. I know you didn't choose it, but fighting me on every single point is exhausting for you and annoying for me. There's a better way." "What way?" "Cooperation, partnership even." His thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture almost tender, if not for the steel in his eyes. "Give me loyalty, and I'll give you protection. Give me respect, and I'll give you freedom within acceptable limits. We can make this work, Mara. If you stop seeing me as the enemy." "You forced me to marry you," Mara said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "How are you not the enemy?" "Because the real enemies are out there." Luca gestured toward the windows, toward the city beyond. "Costello, the families who want my territory, the police who'd love to build a case against me, rivals within my own organization waiting for me to show weakness. Those are enemies. I'm just... the devil you married. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be honest." Luca released her face, stepped back. "I'm going to the office. There's retaliation to plan, damage to assess. You'll stay here. Security will be doubled. No one gets in or out without my explicit approval. I'm back to being a prisoner." "You're back to being safe." Luca headed for the door, paused with his hand on the frame. "My mother likes you, by the way. She called while Marco was driving you back. Said you have potential." "Potential for what?" "She didn't specify, but Mama doesn't compliment lightly." He almost smiled. "Try to get some rest. We have dinner tonight, another family obligation. You'll need your energy." Then he was gone again, leaving Mara alone in the massive penthouse with her thoughts and the distant sounds of the city 25 floors below. She stood there for a long moment, processing everything: the attack, the danger, Luca's strange mix of threat and tenderness, Sophia's advice about fighting smarter instead of harder. Somewhere in the past 24 hours, Mara's life had transformed from graduate student studying criminal psychology to actual criminal's wife, and she had no idea how to navigate this new reality. The penthouse felt different in afternoon light, less oppressive somehow. Mara explored properly for the first time, discovering rooms she hadn't noticed the night before. A library stocked with leather-bound books in multiple languages, a home office with computer equipment that looked military-grade, a second bedroom that appeared to serve as Luca's private gym. In the library, she found family photographs on the shelves between books. A younger Luca with a beautiful dark-haired girl, who must be his sister, Julia. Sophia and a handsome man who could only be Antonio DeSantis, Luca's father, looking happy in what appeared to be their wedding photo. More recent shots of Luca with various men in suits, formal and posed, no genuine smiles anywhere. A life documented in images that showed power, but never joy. Mara was still examining the photos when her phone buzzed, a sound so normal it felt jarring in this surreal new life. She pulled it from her purse, saw her father's name on the screen, and felt her stomach drop. The text was brief. "Are you okay? I heard about the attack. Please tell me you're safe." For a moment, rage threatened to choke her. Patrick Quinn, asking if she was okay, like he hadn't been the one to sell her into this danger in the first place. Like he had any right to her safety or her fear or her forgiveness. Mara's fingers flew over the keyboard. "I'm alive. No thanks to you." The response came immediately. "I'm sorry. I had no choice." "You had a choice. You chose your debt over your daughter. Own it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I never meant for this to happen. Can we talk? Please." Mara stared at the message, at this pathetic plea from the man who'd walked her down the aisle and handed her over like payment, and felt something cold and final settle in her chest. "No?" she typed. "We're done. Don't contact me again." She blocked the number before he could respond, and the action felt like closing a door on her old life. Patrick Quinn had made his choice. Now Mara would make hers, whatever that looked like in this impossible situation. The afternoon crawled past in tense silence, broken only by the occasional sound of security, checking in with each other through radios Mara could hear faintly through the walls. She tried to read, to distract herself, but the words blurred together. Her mind kept circling back to Sophia's advice, to Luca's strange offer of partnership, to the reality that she was now permanently entangled in a world of violence and power. Luca returned just after 6, looking tired in a way that made him seem almost human. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of hours spent managing crisis. "How bad is it?" Mara asked before she could stop herself. He looked surprised by the question. "Bad enough. Costello's escalating faster than anticipated. We'll need to respond decisively. More people will die." "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. That's how this works. Mara wanted to argue, to protest the casual acceptance of death. But what was the point? This was his world. She was just trapped in it. "Dinner's in an hour," Luca said, heading for the bedroom. Another gathering, smaller this time, just the captains and their wives. "Valentina will be there." "Wonderful," Mara muttered. "Wear something that makes a statement." Luca paused in the doorway. "Last night you were the new acquisition. Tonight you're my wife after an attack. Show them you're not afraid." "But I am afraid." "Then lie convincingly." He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Mara with that impossible instruction. Show them you're not afraid. Like fear was something she could just take off with her clothes. Mara chose a dress the color of blood. It hung in the new wardrobe between safer choices. Navy, charcoal, elegant cream. But something about the deep crimson silk called to her. If Luca wanted her to make a statement, fine. She'd make one he couldn't ignore. The dress fit like it had been made for her body specifically, which it probably had been. Whoever Luca had hired to stock this closet knew their work. The neckline was modest enough for a family dinner, but the cut was pure predator, sleek lines that emphasized everything while revealing nothing, the kind of dress that made you look twice and remember what you saw. Mara was fastening diamond earrings, also new, also probably worth more than her car, when Luca emerged from the bathroom in a black suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. His eyes found her in the mirror, and something flickered in their dark depths. "Interesting choice," he said. "You told me to make a statement." "I did." Luca crossed to stand behind her, and Mara forced herself not to flinch when his hand settled on her bare shoulders. "Red is bold, confident. Some might say aggressive. Some might say it matches the bloodshed you're planning." His fingers tightened fractionally. "Careful, Mara. Your honesty is refreshing, but there's a difference between honest and stupid." She met his eyes in the mirror, saw her reflection caught between his hands like a bird in a cage. "What's the difference?" "Honest is saying what you think when we're alone. Stupid is saying it in front of people who will use your words against both of us." Luca's thumb traced her collarbone, the gesture intimate and threatening all at once. "Tonight, you're my wife who survived her first threat. You're strong, composed, and absolutely loyal. Can you play that role?" "I'm not an actress." "Everyone's an actress in this world. Some just hide it better." He released her, stepped back to examine the full effect. "The dress works. You look like you belong at my side, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure." Mara turned to face him properly. "Is that a compliment or an assessment?" "Both." Luca offered his arm. "Come, let's show them exactly what kind of wife I married." The dinner was being held in the penthouse again, which meant Mara didn't even get the brief escape of a car ride to prepare herself. She could hear voices already, the captains and their wives gathering in the living room, drinks flowing, conversations happening in that particular tone people use when they're circling around topics they can't discuss directly. Luca's hand found its familiar place on her lower back as they entered together, and the room went quiet in that way that made Mara's skin crawl. Every eye tracked to them, measuring, judging, looking for cracks in the facade. "Luca," Marco said, raising his glass, "and the beautiful Mrs. DeSantis. We were just discussing Costello's tactical errors." "Were you?" Luca's voice was mild, but Mara felt the tension in his hand against her spine. "I'm sure you came to the same conclusions I did. That he's escalating too fast? Burning through goodwill with moves that look desperate?" This from a man Mara hadn't met yet, late 40s, with the kind of face that had seen every sin imaginable and committed most of them. "Yeah, boss, we're on the same page." Valentina appeared at Mara's elbow with a champagne flute. "You look stunning, darling. Red is definitely your color." "Thank you." Mara accepted the glass because refusing would be noticed and discussed. "I'm still learning the dress code for these gatherings." "The dress code is simple. Look powerful, act confident, and never let them see you bleed." Valentina's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You're doing better than most new wives. Usually they're still crying by day 2. Maybe I'm saving my tears for when they'll be more strategic." Valentina actually laughed at that, genuine amusement lighting her face. "Oh, I like you. You've got spine. That's good. You'll need it." The wives clustered together near the windows, a constellation of designer dresses and calculated glances. Gianna stood at their center in emerald silk that probably cost more than most people's mortgages, holding court like a queen among courtiers. "Mrs. DeSantis," Gianna called out, sugary sweet venom, "come join us. We were just discussing the warehouse incident." "So frightening for you, I'm sure." Mara felt Luca's hand press once against her back, a warning or encouragement, she couldn't tell which, before he released her to join the men's conversation. She was on her own now, walking into the wives' territory with nothing but Sophia's advice and her own rapidly depleting courage. "It was unexpected," Mara said, settling into the group with as much composure as she could fake. "But Marco handled the situation well." "Marco's excellent at security," one of the other wives said, blonde, petite, married to the man with the scarred face. "He kept me safe during the Moretti troubles last year. Very professional." "Professional is one word for it," Gianna murmured. "Though I wonder if our new addition understands exactly what handling the situation means in our world." The trap was obvious but unavoidable. Mara met Gianna's eyes directly. "It means doing whatever's necessary to ensure I made it back here safely. I'm grateful for the competence." "Grateful." Gianna tasted the word like wine. "How diplomatic. Tell me, Mara, do you actually understand what your husband does? Or are you still operating under the delusion that this is all just business ventures and legitimate enterprises?" "I understand enough," Mara said carefully. Do you? Do you understand that Luca ordered retaliation for that warehouse? That men are probably dying right now because someone dared to challenge his territory? Gianna leaned in closer, voice dropping to an intimate whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Do you understand that your presence here makes you complicit in everything he does? Mara's throat went tight. She'd thought about this, circled around it in her mind, but hearing it stated so baldly made it real in a way that turned her stomach. I didn't choose. None of us chose this, Gianna interrupted, but we're here anyway. The question is whether you'll accept what that means or spend your life pretending your hands are clean while your husbands are covered in blood. Gianna, Valentina's voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough. She's been here 2 days. Give her time to adjust before you drown her in existential crises. I'm just being honest, Gianna said, all innocence. Surely that's better than letting her stumble around in ignorance. Honesty and cruelty aren't the same thing. Valentina guided Mara away from the group with gentle pressure on her elbow. Ignore her. Gianna's husband lost 2 men in the warehouse attack. She's taking it out on you because she can't take it out on Luca. 2 men died? Mara's voice came out smaller than she intended. 3 total. 2 of ours, 1 of theirs who got caught in the crossfire. Valentina's expression was matter-of-fact, discussing death like accounting. It's unfortunate, but not unexpected. Costello's been pushing for weeks. This was inevitable. The casual acceptance made Mara feel dizzy. She took a sip of champagne just to have something to do, tasted expensive bubbles and her own rising nausea. From across the room, Luca's gaze found hers. He was deep in conversation with Marco and the other captains, discussing something that involved hand gestures and serious expressions, but he'd noticed her distress. His eyebrow raised fractionally. A silent question. Are you okay? Mara forced herself to nod, to smile, to lie with her face the way he'd instructed. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Luca's attention returned to his conversation, apparently satisfied, and Mara wanted to scream at the casual dismissal. But that would be stupid instead of honest, so she swallowed the rage and turned back to Valentina. How do you do it? The question escaped before Mara could stop it. Live with knowing that people die because of decisions made over dinner and drinks? Valentina studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable. You want the pretty answer or the real one? Real. The real answer is that you stop seeing them as people and start seeing them as pieces in a game. Pawns, soldiers, casualties of a war that was happening long before you arrived and will continue long after you're gone. Valentina's voice was gentle but implacable. It's easier that way, less painful. That's horrible. It's survival. Valentina glanced toward where the men stood discussing strategy and violence. The alternative is to feel every death, carry every victim's weight, and eventually crumble under guilt you can't control. I watched that happen to a wife 3 years ago. She took pills until her heart stopped because she couldn't handle what her husband was. The implication hung between them like smoke. Is that a warning? It's information. What you do with it is up to you. Valentina's attention shifted to something behind Mara. Ah, dinner's ready. Time to play happy family. The dining room table was set for 20. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, centerpieces that probably cost more than Mara's monthly rent back when she'd had her own apartment and her own life. She found herself seated at Luca's right hand, position of honor and scrutiny, while conversations flowed around her in Italian and English, and sometimes languages she didn't recognize. The first course appeared, something delicate and seafood-based that Mara couldn't identify. She pushed it around her plate while Luca discussed territory negotiations with the scarred man on his left, their conversation peppered with names and locations that meant nothing to her. You should eat, Luca murmured without looking at her. People notice when the hostess doesn't touch her food. They'll think you're weak or sick. Maybe I am sick, Mara said quietly. Maybe listening to you plan murders over appetizers is making me nauseous. Then excuse yourself to the bathroom and compose yourself there. His voice stayed low, controlled, but there was steel underneath. Because sitting there looking miserable reflects poorly on both of us. Mara wanted to throw her wine in his face. Instead, she took a bite of whatever it was, chewed mechanically, swallowed past the lump in her throat. Smiled when someone across the table made a joke she didn't understand. played her role like the actress Luca insisted everyone had to be. The main course came and went. Mara noticed Gianna watching her with predatory interest, waiting for her to crack, to make some mistake that could be weaponized later. She noticed Valentina occasionally steering conversations away from topics that might be too much too soon, running interference without making it obvious. She noticed the way Luca's hand would occasionally brush her arm or her back, those constant touches that claimed ownership while appearing affectionate. Somewhere between dessert and after-dinner drinks, Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went carefully blank in a way that made every instinct Mara had screamed danger. "Boss," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Now." Luca excused himself without explanation, following Marco toward the office. The conversation continued without them, but Mara felt the shift in energy. Everyone suddenly more alert, more tense, waiting for whatever news had pulled Luca away. "Probably Costello again," Gianna said, loud enough to carry. "That man's like a dog with a bone. Doesn't know when to quit." "Dogs who don't quit end up put down," one of the captains replied, and several people laughed. Mara didn't laugh. She was watching the office door, watching the shadows visible through the frosted glass, watching Luca's body language shift from casual to combat-ready in the space of seconds. The door opened. Luca emerged with Marco close behind, and the expression on his face made the entire room fall silent. "Everyone out," Luca said. "Now. Dinner's over." No one argued. The captains and their wives gathered belongings, made hasty goodbyes, filed toward the elevator with the practiced efficiency of people who knew better than to question orders. Within 3 minutes, the penthouse was empty except for Luca, Marco, and Mara. "What happened?" Mara asked into the sudden silence. Luca crossed to the bar, poured 3 fingers of whiskey, downed it in one swallow. "Costello took someone. One of ours. Sent a photo to prove it." Marco pulled out his phone, showed Mara a picture she immediately wished she hadn't seen. A young man, early 20s maybe, bound and bloodied in what looked like a warehouse. The message beneath was brief. "Trade for trade. Your wife for my territory." Mara's blood turned to ice. "He wants me. He wants leverage." Luca's voice was controlled but vibrating with fury underneath. "He thinks I'll negotiate, give up ground to get you back. That I'm weak enough to value my new bride over my empire." "Are you?" The question came out before Mara could stop it. Luca's eyes snapped to her, dark and dangerous. "No." The single word landed like a death sentence. Mara felt something inside her crack. Not surprise exactly, but the final shattering of whatever illusion she'd been holding on to that any of this was about her as a person rather than her as property. "So what happens now?" she asked. "You let him keep that man and I stay here." "The man is dead already," Marco said flatly. "Costello's just using him as bait. Whether we trade or not, he dies." "Then we don't trade," Luca said. "We take, and we send a message that makes it very clear what happens to people who threaten what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have been comforting, proof that he'd protect her. Instead, it just felt like another chain. Mine. Not a wife. Not a partner. A possession to be defended because losing possession showed weakness. "I need air," Mara said, heading toward the balcony before either man could stop her. The night was cool. The city spread out below like a carpet of lights and distant sirens. Mara gripped the railing hard enough to hurt, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at her chest. Somewhere out there, a man was dying because Luca wouldn't trade territory for human life. Somewhere out there, Costello was planning his next move. And all of it, was happening because she existed. The balcony door opened behind her. Mara didn't turn, just stayed focused on the city, on the illusion of space and freedom beyond this gilded cage. "You're angry," Luca said. "I'm horrified. Because I won't trade you for territory?" He moved to stand beside her, hands in his pockets, utterly calm. "That man knew the risks when he took this job. His death is unfortunate, but not my responsibility." "Everything is your responsibility," Mara shot back. "You run this organization. You make the decisions. You create the situations where people die." "Yes." No denial, no defensiveness. "I do. That's what being in charge means. Making impossible choices and living with the consequences." "Don't you feel anything? Guilt? Regret? Anything? Luca was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city he controlled through fear and force. I feel everything, he said finally. Every death, every casualty, every person caught in the crossfire of wars I didn't start but have to fight. I feel all of it, Mara. I just can't afford to let it stop me from doing what's necessary. The admission surprised her. Then how do you sleep at night? Poorly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But I sleep next to you now, which helps. How can I possibly help? Because you're proof that I'm not just the monster everyone thinks I am, that I'm capable of building something instead of just destroying. Luca turned to face her fully. You make me human again, even if only in my own mind. Mara didn't know what to do with that confession, with the sudden vulnerability in a man who showed nothing but control. That's not fair to me. I didn't sign up to be your redemption arc. You didn't sign up for any of this. Luca's hand came up, cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. But you're here anyway. We both are. The question is whether we make this bearable or make it hell. It already is hell. Then let's make it a hell we can survive together. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture almost tender. I know I can't be what you wanted. I know this life is nothing you would have chosen, but I can try to be someone you can tolerate, someone who makes this bearable. By not trading me for territory? By proving I'm worth less than land? By proving you're worth everything. Luca's voice dropped to barely a whisper. If I traded you, Mara, if I gave you up to save one soldier, every enemy I have would know exactly how to control me. They'd take you again and again, use you as leverage until there was nothing left of my power or my organization. You'd be kidnapped, ransomed, and brutalized every time someone wanted something from me. The logic was sound, even if Mara hated it. So instead, you let people die. I let soldiers who knew what they signed up for face the consequences of their choices. And I make sure that anyone who threatens you understands that the cost is higher than they can afford to pay. Luca's hand tightened fractionally on her face. Costello thinks he's being strategic. He's actually signing his own death warrant. I will burn everything he has to the ground for this. More death. More violence. Yes. Luca released her, stepped back. That's what this is, Mara. That's what you married into. I won't apologize for it, and I won't stop doing what's necessary to keep us both alive and in power. But I will try to protect you from the worst of it when I can. Marco appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got teams mobilized. They're ready when you give the word. Good. Luca's transformation was instant. The vulnerable man who'd just confessed his fears disappearing behind the mask of the crime boss who ordered executions over dinner. I want Costello's operation hit simultaneously. Warehouses, distribution points, known safe houses, everything. And I want that soldier found. He might already be... I know. Find him anyway. If he's alive, we get him back. If he's dead, we recover the body and bury him properly. His family gets compensation either way. Luca headed back inside, already in full tactical mode, and put extra security on the hotel. Double shifts, no exceptions. Mrs. DeSantis doesn't leave this penthouse until Costello is handled. Understood. Mara followed them back inside, feeling disconnected from her own body, watching this unfold like a film she wasn't actually part of. Marco left to coordinate the response, leaving her alone with Luca again. You should rest, Luca said, loosening his tie. This is going to be a long night. I can't just sleep while people are dying because of me. They're not dying because of you. They're dying because Costello made a strategic error and now has to face consequences. Luca shrugged out of his jacket, draped it over a chair. This would be happening with or without you, Mara. You're just the excuse he chose to use. That doesn't make it better. It's not supposed to make it better. It's supposed to be the truth. Luca headed toward the bedroom, paused at the doorway. I need to make some calls. You can stay up if you want, but there's nothing you can do to help. Sometimes the best thing is to just not watch. He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Mara alone in the living room with her thoughts and the distant sounds of the city. She sank onto the couch, still in her red dress, and tried to process the past few hours. A man was being tortured somewhere because Luca wouldn't trade. Luca's soldiers were mobilizing to hit Costello's operations. People were going to die tonight, maybe a lot of people, and all of it was connected to the fact that she existed, that she wore Luca's ring, that she'd become valuable by virtue of being claimed. Mara pulled out her phone, looked at her blocked calls, thought about her father who'd started all of this with his gambling and his weakness, thought about her old life, graduate school, research, the comfortable fiction that she understood criminal psychology from studying it instead of living it. That person felt like a stranger now. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to Luca shaking her shoulder gently. The living room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. Luca looked exhausted, tie gone completely now, shirt half unbuttoned, hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "Come to bed," he said quietly. "It's 3 in the morning. You'll hurt your neck sleeping on the couch." Mara let him pull her to her feet, guide her to the bedroom in a fog of half sleep. She barely registered changing out of the red dress, pulling on the silk nightgown, climbing between sheets that were cool and smooth and smelled faintly of Luca's cologne. "Did you find him?" she mumbled into the pillow. "The soldier?" "Yes." Luca's weight settled on the other side of the bed. "He was already dead. We recovered the body." "I'm sorry." "Why? You didn't kill him." "I know, but—" Mara rolled over to face him in the darkness. "If we weren't married, if I didn't exist in your life, maybe Costello would have found another excuse." Luca's hand found hers under the covers, squeezed once. "Stop trying to take responsibility for other people's violence, Mara. You'll drive yourself insane." "How do you not go insane?" "Who says I haven't?" His voice carried a dark humor. "Maybe we're all crazy here. Maybe that's the only way to survive." They lay there in the dark, hands touching, both too wired to actually sleep despite the late hour. Mara could feel Luca's tension, the controlled fury that hummed through him like electricity. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow we assess the damage from tonight's operations. We plan the next phase. We make sure Costello understands that threatening you was the worst decision he ever made." Luca's thumb traced circles on her palm. "And you stay here, safe, while I handle it." "I'm always staying here, safe and useless and trapped." "Safe and alive." Luca rolled closer and Mara could just make out his features in the dim light. "I know you hate this. I know you feel powerless. But you're alive, Mara. In this world, that's not nothing. It feels like nothing. Then we'll work on making it feel like something." His hand came up, traced her jawline with surprising gentleness. "I told you, I can try to be someone you can tolerate. Someone who makes this bearable." "Let me try." Mara wanted to pull away, to maintain the distance between captor and captive, to not let herself see him as anything but the criminal who'd stolen her life. But exhaustion and fear and the strange intimacy of darkness made her honest instead. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be your wife when I'm also your prisoner." "Then maybe stop trying to be one or the other. Just be Mara." Luca's voice was soft in the darkness. "Be the woman who wears red to family dinners and argues with crime bosses and survives her first week in hell. That's enough." "Is it?" "For now." His hand stilled on her face. "Sleep, Mara. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." She didn't mean to drift off, didn't mean to let her guard down, but between the late hour and the unexpected comfort of not being completely alone in this nightmare, sleep crept up on her anyway. The last thing Mara felt was Luca's thumb brushing across her cheekbone one more time, a gesture that could have been possessive or protective or something in between that she didn't have words for yet. Mara woke to gunfire. Not distant, not muffled by walls and distance, but close. Sharp cracks that sent her bolt upright in bed, with her heart trying to escape through her ribs. The bedroom was dark except for the city lights filtering through windows that suddenly seemed far too exposed, far too fragile. Luca was already moving, already out of bed and reaching for the gun he apparently kept in the nightstand. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who knew exactly how many seconds he had between the first shot and whatever came next. "Stay down," he ordered, voice clipped and cold. "Don't move from this spot." More gunfire erupted from somewhere in the penthouse, the living room maybe, or the hallway, shouting in Italian, in English, in languages Mara couldn't identify through the adrenaline flooding her system, breaking glass, the heavy thud of bodies hitting floor. Luca was at the bedroom door now, gun raised, speaking rapidly into a phone Mara hadn't seen him grab. "How many?" "Where's Marco?" "I don't care about protocols. Get every available man to the 25th floor now. He listened for 3 seconds, expression going from controlled fury to something darker. They're already inside the building? How the hell? Another burst of gunfire cut him off. Never mind, just get here. Luca ended the call and turned back to Mara, who was still frozen in the bed, unable to process what was happening. Closet. Now. There's a panic room built into the back wall. Code is your birthday, month, day, year, 6 digits. Lock yourself in and don't come out until I come get you. What about you? I'm handling this. He crossed back to her in 3 strides, grabbed her arm, hauled her bodily out of bed. Move, Mara, now. The urgency in his voice finally penetrated her shock. Mara stumbled toward the walk-in closet while Luca positioned himself by the bedroom door, gun trained on the entrance like he was expecting company any second. The closet was massive and dark, and Mara's hand shook so hard she could barely find the light switch. When illumination finally flooded the space, she saw what Luca meant. The back wall looked like solid wood paneling, but there was a nearly invisible seam, a keypad hidden behind a tie rack that she would never have found if he hadn't told her exactly where to look. Her birthday. Month, day, year. Mara's fingers fumbled over the numbers 031796, and the panel clicked, swung inward to reveal a small room that was basically a reinforced box with a bench, emergency supplies, and a phone mounted on the wall. She just stepped inside when the bedroom door exploded inward. Luca fired 3 times in rapid succession, the muzzle flash bright in the darkness. Someone screamed. More gunfire answered, and Luca dove behind the bed, returning fire with the cold precision of someone who'd done this too many times to count. Mara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch through the gap in the closet door as armed men poured into the bedroom. 5 of them, maybe 6, all wearing dark clothes and ski masks like something out of a nightmare. One of them spotted her. There, he shouted, pointing directly at the closet. The wife! Luca's head snapped around, saw Mara still standing frozen in the doorway instead of locked safely inside the panic room. His expression went through several emotions in a fraction of a second: fury, fear, calculation, before settling on grim determination. Run! He roared at her, laying down covering fire that forced the intruders to scatter. Mara finally moved, scrambling backward into the panic room, slamming the door just as bullets tore through the closet. The panel was reinforced steel beneath the wood veneer. She felt the impacts as vibrations rather than penetration, but the sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Her shaking hands found the interior lock, threw it just as someone tried the handle from outside. The mechanism held. For now. Through the steel door, Mara could hear the firefight continuing. Luca's controlled shots, the attacker's wild spray, breaking furniture and shattering glass. Someone was screaming in pain. Someone else was shouting orders in Italian too rapid for her to follow. Then silence, sudden and absolute, more terrifying than the noise had been. Mara pressed her ear to the door, trying to hear anything, trying to know if Luca was alive or dead or captured. The panic room had a small monitor showing security feeds from the penthouse, but the screen was black. Cameras disabled or destroyed. She was blind, deaf, utterly helpless. The phone on the wall rang. Mara stared at it for 3 full seconds before her brain processed that phones don't ring randomly during home invasions. Someone was calling the panic room. Someone who knew the number. She grabbed the receiver. Hello? Mrs. DeSantis. The voice was male, unfamiliar, with an accent she couldn't quite place. I'm Vincent Costello. I believe you know who I am. Ice flooded Mara's veins. Where's Luca? Your husband is currently bleeding on his bedroom floor. Not dead. I need him alive for the next part. But definitely not in a position to help you. Costello's voice was pleasant, conversational, like they were discussing weather instead of violence. You're in the panic room, yes? Smart. Luca always was thorough about security. What do you want? What I've wanted from the beginning: territory, respect, and proof that Luca DeSantis isn't untouchable. A pause, sounds of movement on Costello's end. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to open that door and come out peacefully. If you cooperate, I'll let Luca live. If you don't, I'll execute him right here and then blow that door open anyway. You have 60 seconds to decide. Mara's mind raced through impossible options. Stay locked in and let Luca die? Open the door and become a hostage? There had to be another choice, some third option that didn't end in death or capture. I'm waiting, Mrs. DeSantis. 50 seconds now.
How do I know you'll keep your word? Mara's voice came out stronger than she felt. How do I know you won't just kill us both? You don't. But I'm a businessman, not a monster. Dead, Luca is a martyr that unites his organization against me. Alive and humiliated, watching his wife get taken because he couldn't protect her? That destroys him more effectively than any bullet. Costello's smile was audible. 40 seconds. Through the phone, Mara heard a groan that could only be Luca. Injured, bleeding, possibly dying while she hid in a steel box trying to decide if trusting his enemy was better than letting him die. Sophia's words came back to her with crystalline clarity. In this world, you need steel, the ability to do what's necessary even when it breaks your heart. Mara looked at the lock on the door, at the phone in her hand. At the emergency supplies that included, she noticed for the first time, a handgun mounted on the wall. What's necessary, even when it breaks your heart? 20 seconds, Mrs. DeSantis. Mara made her choice. I'm opening the door, she said. Don't shoot. I'm unarmed and I'm cooperating. Smart girl. Costello's approval was sickening. Slowly now. Hands where we can see them. Mara hung up the phone, took 3 deep breaths that did nothing to calm her racing heart, and reached for the lock. Her hand froze on the mechanism as she looked at the gun on the wall. She'd fired exactly twice in her life. A shooting range her ex-boyfriend had dragged her to, target practice that had bored her senseless. But she knew the basics. Point, squeeze, hope you hit something vital before they kill you. The gun was a compact pistol, smaller than Luca's, probably designed for someone with smaller hands. Mara grabbed it, checked that it was loaded the way she vaguely remembered from that long-ago afternoon, and tucked it into the waistband of her nightgown at the small of her back. If they patted her down, they'd find it immediately. If they didn't, if they underestimated her because she was just the new wife, just a graduate student who'd been sold into this life, maybe she'd get one chance to use it. Maybe one chance was all she needed. Mara unlocked the door, pushed it open slowly, stepped out into the closet with her hands raised. 2 masked men waited there, guns trained on her, positions suggesting they'd been standing guard the entire time she'd been locked in. Out, one of them ordered. Living room, move. They flanked her as she walked through the destroyed bedroom, past overturned furniture and bullet holes in the walls, past blood splattered across the expensive carpet in patterns that made her stomach turn. One of the men, Costello's soldiers, she assumed, lay motionless near the door, clearly dead. Another was slumped against the wall, breathing shallowly, watching her pass with glazed eyes. The living room was worse. Luca knelt in the center of the space, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood soaking through his white undershirt from a wound in his left shoulder. His face was bruised, lips split, but his eyes were alert and absolutely murderous. When he saw Mara, flanked by armed men, every muscle in his body went rigid. "Let her go," he said, voice rough but controlled. "This is between us, Costello. She's not part of it. She became part of it when you married her." Vincent Costello stepped out from behind the bar, and Mara got her first look at the man who'd orchestrated this attack. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-40s maybe, handsome in a sharp-featured way, wearing a suit that somehow remained pristine despite the violence surrounding him. His smile was professional, pleasant, the kind of expression you'd see across a boardroom table instead of at a hostage situation. "Mrs. DeSantis," Costello said, gesturing to a chair like he was inviting her to tea. "Please sit. We have business to discuss." "Don't," Luca growled. "Don't say a word to him, Mara. Don't negotiate, don't bargain, don't—" One of Costello's men hit Luca across the face with a gun, hard enough to snap his head sideways. Blood sprayed from his mouth. Mara flinched but forced herself not to react beyond that, forced herself to walk calmly to the indicated chair and sit with her hands folded in her lap. The gun pressed cold against her spine, hidden by the silk of her nightgown. Secret. Waiting. "Better," Costello said. "Now then, I'm going to make this very simple. I want 3 of Luca's territories, the docks, the warehouse district, and the downtown casino operations. In exchange, I'll let you both live. You'll be diminished, Luca, but alive. That's generous, considering." "Go to hell," Luca spat, blood staining his teeth. "I expected that response."
Costello turned his attention to Mara. What about you, Mrs. DeSantis? Do you want your husband to die over territory, over pride, or would you rather convince him to take the deal and survive? The trap was obvious but elegant. If Mara stayed silent, she was complicit in whatever happened next. If she begged Luca to take the deal, she proved she was weak, a liability he'd resent. If she refused, shoot him if you want, Mara said, meeting Costello's eyes directly. I'm not convincing my husband to give you anything. The room went silent. Luca's head came up, shock visible beneath the blood and bruising. Costello's pleasant expression flickered, just for a second, before resettling into something harder. Bold, Costello said. Stupid, but bold. You realize I will actually kill him? You're going to kill him anyway. Mara kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. That's how this works, right? You can't let him live after breaking into his home, beating him in front of his wife, and taking his territory. He'd spend every resource he has hunting you down for the humiliation. So the deal is a lie. You're going to kill us both no matter what we do. Costello's smile widened. You're smarter than you look. Mara, Luca's voice held a warning she ignored. So here's my counteroffer, Mara continued, hands still folded primly in her lap while the gun dug into her spine. You let us both go, unharmed, and we'll consider not burning your entire operation to the ground in retaliation. Costello actually laughed at that, genuine amusement lighting his face. And why would I possibly take that deal when I have all the power here? Because you don't. Mara leaned forward slightly. You think you've won because you got past security and captured Luca. But his people know about this attack by now. They're on their way here, probably already in the building, probably surrounding this penthouse as we speak. You're on a clock, Mr. Costello. And killing us just traps you in here with dozens of armed, very loyal soldiers who will tear you apart for touching their boss. The flicker of uncertainty in Costello's eyes told her she'd guessed right. This was a smash-and-grab operation, not a siege. He'd counted on getting in, making his point, and getting out before reinforcements arrived. But Mara had stalled, opened the panic room door slowly, walked slowly to her chair. Every second of delay was another second closer to rescue, or to everyone dying in the crossfire. That was entirely possible, too. You're bluffing, Costello said, but he glanced toward his men, toward the windows, checking his exits. Am I? Mara smiled, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't actually feel. Test it. Kill us. See what happens when you try to leave. As if on cue, gunfire erupted from the hallway. Shouting. The unmistakable sound of a breaching charge blowing the penthouse's front door off its hinges. Costello's expression went from confident to calculating to furious in the space of 3 heartbeats. Grab her, he snapped at his men. We're leaving. She's our ticket out. 2 of them moved toward Mara. She waited until they were close, until their attention was on grabbing her arms rather than watching her hands, until the angle was right. Then she pulled the gun from behind her back and shot the nearest one in the chest. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The man went down hard, surprise and pain etched on his face. His partner swung his own weapon toward her, but Luca, still zip-tied and bleeding, somehow launched himself from his kneeling position and tackled the man's legs. They went down in a tangle of limbs and violence. Mara swung the gun toward Costello, hands shaking so hard she could barely keep it level, and found herself staring down the barrel of his weapon. Stand off, Costello said pleasantly. How cinematic. Drop it, Mara ordered, voice cracking. Drop it, or You'll what? Shoot me? From 10 feet away while you're shaking like a leaf and I'm perfectly calm? Costello's smile was pitying. Sweet girl, you don't have the training or the nerve, so here's what's actually going to happen. Mara pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, caught Costello in the left arm instead of center mass like she'd been aiming for. He staggered, cursed, and his return fire went wide too, bullets slamming into the wall behind her instead of her body. Then the world exploded into chaos. The penthouse filled with armed men in tactical gear, Luca's security team pouring through every entrance at once. Costello's remaining soldiers tried to fight, tried to retreat, tried to surrender. Most of them didn't make it past the first option. Marco appeared out of nowhere, knife flashing as he cut through Luca's zip ties. Luca was on his feet instantly despite the gunshot wound, despite the blood loss, pure fury animating him beyond his injuries. Costello! He snarled, spotting the man trying to retreat toward the balcony. You're not leaving. What happened next was brutal and efficient and over in seconds. Luca moved like violence incarnate, every punch calculated to cause maximum pain without granting the mercy of unconsciousness. Costello fought back. The man clearly had training, but he was injured, outnumbered, and facing someone with nothing left to lose. The fight ended with Costello on his knees, Luca's hand fisted in his hair, and a gun pressed to the base of his skull. "Wait," Costello gasped. "Wait, please. We can still negotiate." "Negotiate?" Luca's voice was arctic. "You broke into my home, shot me, threatened my wife, and you think there's room for negotiation? I can give you information, routes, names, everything you need to take over my operation. I don't need your permission to take what's mine." Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't," Mara heard herself say. Every head in the room turned toward her. She was still standing where Costello had left her, still holding the gun she'd used, still trying to process the fact that she'd actually shot someone. That the man was lying 3 feet away, bleeding onto Luca's expensive carpet, possibly dying. Because of her. "Mara," Luca started. "Don't kill him." Her voice came out steady despite everything. "Not like this. Not execution style in front of witnesses. That makes you the monster everyone says you are." "I am the monster everyone says I am," Luca said flatly. "That's not news." "But you don't have to prove it to me." Mara finally lowered the gun, set it on the nearest surface with shaking hands. "You told me you could try to be someone I could tolerate. Someone who makes this bearable. Is this bearable? Watching you murder someone in cold blood 3 feet from where I'm standing?" The penthouse went absolutely silent. Luca stared at her, expression unreadable, gun still pressed to Costello's skull. His finger stayed on the trigger. One squeeze and the decision would be made, the moment would pass, the violence would be complete. "He tried to take you," Luca said quietly. "He broke into our home and put his hands on what's mine. There's only one response to that." "Then respond differently." Mara took a step toward him, then another, until she was close enough to see the fury and fear and something almost like desperation in his dark eyes. "Be different than what everyone expects. Be better. Better doesn't work in this world. Then change the world." She reached out, covered his hand with hers, the one holding the gun, the one that could end a life with a twitch. "Please, Luca, for me, be better." The silence stretched so long Mara thought he might actually pull the trigger anyway. Prove that her words meant nothing against the reality of his nature. That monsters don't change just because someone asks nicely. Then Luca lowered the gun. "Take him," he ordered Marco. "Lock him up. We'll deal with him later, when I'm thinking clearly." Marco and 2 other men hauled Costello to his feet, dragged him toward the exit. The man was babbling thanks, promises, offers of cooperation that no one acknowledged. He'd live, for now. But the terror on his face suggested he understood that might not be mercy. The moment he was gone, Luca's knees buckled. Mara caught him, or tried to. He outweighed her by at least 60 pounds, and they both went down, tangled together on the blood-stained carpet. This close, she could see how pale he was, how much blood he'd lost, how the shoulder wound was still bleeding steadily. "Medic!" Marco shouted. "Get the doctor up here now!" Mara pressed her hands to Luca's shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding the way she'd seen in movies, the way she'd never actually learned, because why would a graduate student need to know combat first aid? "You're an idiot," she told him, pressure making him wince. "You should have stayed down. You're going to bleed out because you couldn't let someone else handle Costello." "Had to protect you," Luca managed through gritted teeth. "My job. Protect what's mine." "I'm not yours to protect, I'm just—" Mara's voice cracked. "I'm just a person you married, a transaction. Remember?" "No." Luca's hand came up, bloody and shaking, to cup her face. "You're more than that. You were more than that the moment you told Costello to shoot me rather than beg. The moment you pulled a gun you barely know how to use and tried to save us both. You're more than a transaction, Mara. You're—" He passed out before he could finish the thought. The next few hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. A doctor arrived. One of Luca's people, clearly used to treating gunshot wounds without asking questions. He set up a makeshift surgery right there in the living room while Marco coordinated cleanup crews and damage assessment and security sweeps. Mara sat on the blood-stained couch, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, watching the doctor work on Luca's unconscious body. The bullet had gone through clean, missing major arteries, but he'd lost a lot of blood. The doctor kept using words like stable and fortunate and should recover fully. Should, not will, should. Mrs. DeSantis. Valentina appeared from somewhere, holding a cup of tea Mara didn't remember asking for. You should rest. This could take hours. I shot someone, Mara said, staring at her hands. There was blood under her fingernails. Luca's or Costello's, soldiers, or her own, from something she couldn't remember. I pulled a trigger, and a man fell down, and now he might be dead. He's not dead. Wounded, but stable. Valentina sat beside her, pressed the tea into her hands with gentle insistence. You did what you had to do. That's survival. That's murder. That's self-defense. Valentina's voice was firm. They broke in. They threatened you. You protected yourself and your husband. No one here blames you for that. Mara wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that simple narrative, but she kept seeing the man's face as he fell, the surprise and pain, and the moment his eyes went from focused to glazed. She'd caused that, with her choice, her action. The first one is always hardest, Valentina continued quietly. The first time you cross that line, it feels impossible, like you've destroyed something essential in yourself. But you haven't. You've just discovered you're stronger than you thought. I don't feel strong. I feel sick. That's normal too. Valentina stood, squeezed Mara's shoulder. Rest. The boss will want to see you when he wakes up, and you'll need your strength for that conversation. She left Mara alone with her tea and her thoughts, and the distant sounds of the doctor working to save the man who'd bought her, married her, and somehow become something more complicated than captor in the space of 4 impossible days. Luca woke just before dawn, consciousness returning in stages. First his eyes opened, unfocused and confused. Then awareness sharpened as memory returned. The attack, the fight, Mara asking him to be better. He found her exactly where she'd been for the past 3 hours, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching him. Hey, he said, voice rough from anesthesia or pain or both. Hey yourself. Mara didn't move from her spot. How do you feel? Like I got shot. Luca tried to sit up, made it about 6 inches before the doctor appeared and pushed him back down. How long was I out? 3 hours. Surgery went well. Bullets out, wounds clean. You'll have another scar for your collection. The doctor began checking vitals with brisk efficiency. You need rest, antibiotics, and absolutely no strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Not possible. Not negotiable, the doctor interrupted. You want to heal or you want to tear open those stitches and bleed out doing something stupid? Your choice. Luca scowled but settled back against the pillows someone had propped behind him. His gaze found Mara again, searching her face for something. You're okay? They didn't hurt you? I'm fine. Physically, anyway. Mara finally set down the long, cold tea. Mentally is another question. You shot someone. Not a question. I did. First time? Obviously. Luca was quiet for a moment, processing. How do you feel about it? Honestly? I don't know. Mara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Part of me knows it was necessary. Part of me can't stop seeing his face. Part of me wonders if this is who I am now, someone who shoots people and survives home invasions and watches her husband nearly die. That's not who you are, Luca said quietly. That's just what you had to do to survive. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like every day I'm here, I become more like you. More comfortable with violence. More willing to compromise pieces of myself to make this work. She finally looked at him directly. You're changing me, Luca, and I don't know if I like what I'm becoming. The words hit him visibly, pain flashing across his face that had nothing to do with the gunshot wound. I never wanted... He stopped, started again. I brought you into this world. That's on me. But you choosing to be strong, choosing to fight instead of breaking, that's all you, Mara. Don't let me take credit for your strength. I don't feel strong. You held a gun on Costello while you were shaking so hard you could barely stand. You stalled him long enough for reinforcements to arrive. You shot one of his men to protect me. Luca's hand found hers, squeezed gently. You're the strongest person in this room, and you don't even realize it. Mara wanted to pull away, to maintain the distance between them, but exhaustion and relief and the strange intimacy of survival made her honest instead. I asked you not to kill him, to be better.
Did I just doom us both? Maybe. Luca's smile was tired but genuine. Or maybe you just changed the rules of this game in a way that gives us new options. Costello alive is information, leverage, possibilities. Costello dead is just revenge. We'll see which one proves more valuable. And if keeping him alive gets us killed, then we die knowing we tried to be better than this world expects. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture becoming familiar now.
That's worth something, isn't it? Before Mara could answer, Marco appeared in the doorway looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Boss, we need to talk. Security footage shows how they got in. You're not going to like it. Luca's expression hardened. Inside job? Looks that way. Marco's jaw was tight. Someone disabled specific cameras, gave them access codes, told them exactly when and where to breach. Whoever it was had detailed knowledge of our security protocols. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. Someone in Luca's inner circle had betrayed him, had given Costello the information needed to break into what should have been an impenetrable fortress. Find them, Luca said, voice like death. I don't care how long it takes or what you have to do. Find out who sold us out and bring them to me. Already on it. Marco hesitated. There's something else. Costello's talking, trying to trade information for leniency. What kind of information? Says there's a bigger plan. That attacking you was just one piece. Won't give details until he has guarantees. Marco glanced at Mara, clearly uncomfortable discussing this in front of her. What do you want me to do with him? Luca looked at Mara, expression unreadable. What do you think, wife? Your mercy bought him a few hours of life. How far does that mercy extend? The question was a test, Mara realized, not of her weakness or her strength, but of her judgment, of whether she could navigate this world with both compassion and calculation. Keep him alive, she said finally. Make him talk. If he's telling the truth about a bigger plan, we need to know. If he's lying, we can always kill him later. Pragmatic, Luca approved. Good. Do it, he told Marco. Get every piece of information he has, then we'll decide if he's worth keeping. Marco nodded and disappeared back into the chaos of cleanup and investigation. The penthouse was slowly returning to order. Blood cleaned up, bullet holes documented, security protocols being revised in real time. Mara stood, needing to move, needing to process, needing to escape the intensity of Luca's attention. I should change. This nightgown is ruined. Mara. Luca's voice stopped her at the bedroom door. Thank you for asking me to be better, for believing I could be. She didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet. We still don't know if it was the right choice. But in the privacy of the bedroom, or what was left of it after the firefight, Mara let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere between the wedding and this moment, between being sold and choosing to fight, she'd stopped seeing Luca as just her captor. She'd started seeing him as her partner, and that terrified her more than any of Costello's threats ever could. The traitor was found 72 hours later, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Mara was in the library, pretending to read while actually replaying the attack in her mind for the 1,000th time, when Marco appeared in the doorway with an expression that made her stomach drop. Mrs. DeSantis, the boss needs you. Conference room. Now. She followed him through the penthouse, still being repaired, still showing scars from the firefight, despite the cleanup crew's best efforts. Luca had been moved to the guest bedroom while the master suite was being restored, and he'd spent the past 3 days conducting business from what amounted to a hospital bed, refusing to rest despite the doctor's orders. The conference room was one of the spaces that had escaped damage. Mara stepped inside to find Luca sitting at the head of the table, pale but composed, with his injured arm in a sling. Marco stood beside him. 2 other men Mara recognized as senior captains flanked the door, and tied to a chair in the center of the room, bloodied and terrified, was someone she never expected to see. Tony Marchetti, the young man who'd brought them drinks at the wedding reception, who'd smiled and bowed and seemed utterly harmless. Mara, Luca said quietly, come sit. She took the chair he indicated, unable to look away from Tony's battered face. What's happening? Tony was the inside man. Luca's voice was flat, emotionless. He gave Costello everything he needed to breach our security. Access codes, camera positions, my schedule, your schedule, every piece of information that almost got us both killed. Mara's mind struggled to process this. Tony couldn't be more than 25, fresh-faced and eager to please. He didn't look like a traitor. He looked like a kid who'd made a terrible mistake. "Why?" she asked, directing the question at Tony. The young man's eyes were swollen nearly shut, but he managed to focus on her. "My sister. Costello has my sister. Said he'd kill her if I didn't help. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Luca interrupted coldly. "You chose to betray your family to save one person. That choice cost lives. It almost cost Mara's life. So now you get to face the consequences." Tony started crying, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. "Please, boss, please, my sister is innocent. She didn't do anything. If you could just—" "I don't care about your sister." Luca's words were surgical in their precision. "I care that you broke our most fundamental rule, loyalty. Without it, this entire organization falls apart." Mara watched Luca's face, saw the absolute certainty there, the iron resolve that had no room for mercy or compassion. This was the man who'd forced her to marry him, who'd built an empire on violence and fear. This was the monster everyone warned her about, and he was about to kill a terrified kid. "Wait," she heard herself say. Luca's gaze shifted to her, surprise flickering across his features. "Mara, just wait, please." She stood, moved closer to Tony, studied his tear-stained face. "Where's your sister now?" "I don't know. Costello moves her every few days. She's leveraged to keep me in line." Tony's voice cracked. "I tried to find her, tried to get her back, but his security is too tight. I had to cooperate or he'd kill her. I had to." "So you gave him everything he asked for," Mara said, "including the information that nearly got me kidnapped. And Luca killed." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted—" Tony dissolved into sobs again. Mara looked at Luca, saw him watching her with that intense focus he brought to everything, waiting to see what she'd do, testing her again, always testing. "We need to find his sister," she said. The room went silent. Marco actually took a step forward, expression incredulous. "Mrs. DeSantis, with all respect, this man betrayed us. His sister's situation is unfortunate, but not our problem. It is our problem if we want to actually solve this instead of just creating another corpse." Mara kept her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "Tony betrayed us because Costello gave him an impossible choice. We killed Tony, and Costello still has his sister, still has leverage, still has proof that threatening families works as strategy." "So what are you suggesting?" Luca asked, tone carefully neutral. "We find the sister. We get her back. We show Costello that his leverage is worthless and that we protect our people even when they make mistakes." Mara met Luca's eyes directly. "You told me you could try to be better. This is what better looks like." "Better gets you killed in this world," Marco said flatly. "Maybe. Or maybe better makes you strong enough that people don't dare threaten your family in the first place." Mara turned back to Tony. "If we get your sister back, will you tell us everything you know about Costello's operation? Where he's keeping her, who else he's compromised, what his bigger plan is?" Tony nodded frantically. Yes, anything. Everything. Just please, please save her." Luca was silent for a long moment, calculation visible behind his dark eyes. "This is a waste of resources," he said finally. "We should execute Tony, move on, tighten security against future betrayals." "You could do that," Mara agreed. "It would be efficient, cold, exactly what everyone expects from you. Or you could show that loyalty works both ways, that protecting your people includes protecting what they love. Which option do you think builds a stronger organization?" The question hung in the air. Mara could see Luca weighing options, running scenarios, calculating risks and benefits with the precision of a chess master planning 10 moves ahead. "Marco," he said finally, "get every piece of information Tony has about his sister's location and Costello's security, then find her. I want her here, safe, within 24 hours. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but knew better. "Yes, boss." "And Tony?" Luca's gaze shifted to the terrified young man. "You're still going to answer for your betrayal. But if your information leads us to your sister and gives us actionable intelligence on Costello, I'll consider that partial payment. Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll tell you everything. Save it for Marco. Luca waved a dismissive hand. Get him out of here. And get me Costello. It's time we had a conversation. The room emptied quickly, leaving Mara alone with Luca. He looked exhausted, pain etched into the lines around his eyes, despite his controlled facade. You're going to get us killed with your mercy, he said, but there was no heat in it. Maybe, or maybe I'm going to change the rules of how this game is played. Mara moved to stand beside his chair. You can't build loyalty through fear alone, Luca. Eventually, people find something they're more afraid of losing, like Tony's sister. Then your fear becomes meaningless. And you think compassion works better? I think strategic compassion works better, showing that you protect your people, even when they make mistakes, even when it costs you something. That builds the kind of loyalty that can't be bought or threatened away. She hesitated, then added, It's what your mother would do. Luca actually smiled at that, faint but genuine. You've been talking to Mama. She calls every day to check on me. Apparently she's decided I'm worth keeping around. Mara settled into the chair beside him. She told me about your father, how he ruled through fear and respect, but never trust. How it left him vulnerable to betrayal. My father was a great man. Your father was murdered by someone in his inner circle because they knew he'd never see it coming. He didn't build trust. He built fear, and fear made him predictable. Mara's voice gentled. You're better than that, Luca. You could be better than him. The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Luca was quiet for a long time, staring at nothing, processing. Costello's information checked out, he said finally, changing the subject. There is a bigger plan. Multiple families working together to take me down, divide my territory. Costello was just the opening move. Ice flooded Mara's veins. How many families? 3 that we know of. Maybe more. Luca's jaw tightened. They're calling it a coalition. United Front against the DeSantis organization. They think I'm vulnerable after the wedding, distracted by my new wife, too focused on appearances to see the knife coming. Are they right? They were. Luca looked at her, something complicated in his expression. Then my wife turned out to be the most strategic thinker in my organization. Now I'm not sure if I'm distracted or better armed than I've ever been. The compliment caught Mara off guard. I don't know anything about running a criminal enterprise. No, but you understand people, psychology, what motivates them, what breaks them, what makes them loyal. Luca reached for her hand with his uninjured arm. You're seeing patterns I've been too close to notice. Like with Tony, I would have killed him and created a martyr. You saw an opportunity to flip a liability into an asset. If we can actually find his sister, we will. Marco's the best at what he does. Luca's thumb traced familiar patterns on her palm. The question is what we do after. This coalition won't stop with one failed attack. They'll keep coming until they succeed or we destroy them completely. Then we destroy them, Mara said, surprised by how easily the words came. When had she started thinking in terms of we? When had Luca's enemies become her enemies too? Spoken like a true DeSantis. Luca's smile was proud and sad in equal measure. You're changing too, you know. Becoming someone who can survive in this world. I just hope you don't hate me for it when this is all over. Mara wanted to tell him she already hated him, that forcing her into this life was unforgivable, that she'd never truly accept what he'd done. But sitting there in the damaged penthouse, holding the hand of a man who'd nearly died protecting her, who'd listened when she asked him to be better, who was trying, actually trying to be more than the monster his world expected, the words felt like lies. I don't hate you, she said instead. I don't know what I feel about you yet. But it's not hate. Before Luca could respond, Marco burst back into the room, phone in hand, expression urgent. Boss, we've got a problem. The coalition just made their next move. Luca was on his feet instantly, despite the pain it clearly caused. What happened? They hit 3 of our locations simultaneously, the casino, the docks, and your mother's house. Marco's voice was tight. The casino and docks are secure. We drove them off. But your mother, is she hurt? The question came out sharp as a blade. No. She barricaded herself in the safe room with her security team. But they've got the house surrounded. At least 20 men. Professional operation. Marco pulled up security footage on his tablet. They're not trying to breach. They're just waiting. Waiting for me. Luca's expression went cold. They want me to come rescue Mama. Walk into an ambush trying to save her. It's a trap, Marco agreed. We go in, they take you out. The coalition wins. Mara's mind raced through scenarios, through psychology and strategy, and the kind of thinking that had gotten her through graduate school. What do they actually want? Really? Both men looked at her. What do you mean? Luca asked. I mean, killing you is one goal. But if that was the only goal, they could have done it during the attack here. They had you wounded, vulnerable. Why didn't Costello finish it? Mara stood, started pacing. They want something else. Something that requires you alive, at least temporarily. Surrender, Marco said. They want him to give up territory voluntarily, publicly. Makes them look stronger than if they just killed him. Exactly. They want to break you before they kill you, humiliate you, destroy your reputation so thoroughly that even your death becomes a footnote. Mara turned to Luca. So we don't give them that. We don't rush in angry and reckless. We think 3 moves ahead, like you've been teaching me. Luca's eyes lit with something like pride. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they expect you to choose between your pride and your mother. They expect you to either abandon her, which destroys your reputation as someone who protects family, or rush to save her and walk into their trap. Mara pulled up the security footage, studied the men surrounding Sophia's brownstone. What if we do neither? I'm listening. We negotiate, publicly, loudly. Make it look like you're considering their demands while actually buying time to position your people. Mara's mind was spinning now, seeing the strategy like a chessboard. Meanwhile, we use Tony's information to find his sister. When we do, we don't just rescue her. We use her location to trace back to Costello's operation. Find out where he's coordinating from. And then? Marco's skepticism was wavering into something like interest. Then we hit him first, cut the head off the snake while the coalition is focused on your mother's house. Without Costello coordinating, the coalition falls apart. 3 families working together becomes 3 families looking for advantage. They turn on each other instead of you. The plan spilled out of Mara in a rush, strategy built on psychology, and the patterns she'd learned studying criminal organizations. It was risky, complicated, required perfect timing, and dozens of things to go right. It was also exactly the kind of lateral thinking that might actually work. Luca stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You just planned a counteroffensive in 30 seconds. Is it a good plan? It's brilliant. He turned to Marco. Can we do it? Marco was already making notes, running calculations. If Tony's information is solid, if we can find the sister fast enough, if the coalition stays focused on the house long enough, yeah, boss, we can do it. Then do it. I want teams ready to move the second we have a location. And get me a phone line to the coalition. Time to convince them I'm weak enough to negotiate. The next 6 hours were controlled chaos. Mara watched from the sidelines as Luca's organization transformed into a precision instrument, every piece moving into place with practiced efficiency. Tony gave up everything he knew: safe houses, schedules, security protocols, the name of the man directly guarding his sister. Marco's team found the location within 3 hours. A warehouse in the industrial district. Minimal security because Costello had never expected anyone to look for one hostage among hundreds of properties. We go in quiet, Marco briefed his team. Extraction only. Get the girl out, leave no trace we were there. Boss wants Costello to think his leverage still works. Meanwhile, Luca played his part perfectly. He called the coalition leadership, voice heavy with defeat, discussing terms for Sophia's release. Territory concessions, public apologies, all the humiliations they dreamed of extracting from the great Luca DeSantis. He sounded broken, desperate, exactly what they wanted to hear. Mara listened to the performance from beside him, marveling at how easily he lied, how convincingly he played weakness. This was a man who'd built an empire on reading people, on giving them what they expected while hiding his true intentions behind masks within masks. The extraction team moved at midnight. Mara watched the operation unfold on security feeds, grainy footage of Marco's men infiltrating the warehouse, neutralizing guards with practiced efficiency, finding Tony's sister locked in a back room. The girl was 17, terrified, malnourished. They wrapped her in blankets, carried her out like she weighed nothing, disappeared into the night before Costello's people even knew they'd been there. "Package secure," Marco's voice crackled through the radio. "Bringing her to the safe house. Boss, we found something else. Costello's got a command center here. Documents, communications, the whole coalition operation laid out." Luca's expression was predatory. "Copy everything, then burn it. Let Costello think it was an electrical fire, bad luck, nothing to do with us." "Understood." The command center burned at 1 in the morning. By 2, Tony's sister was safe in one of Luca's properties, being checked by doctors, given food and safety, and the promise that her nightmare was over. By 3, the coalition was falling apart exactly as Mara had predicted. Without their command center, without Costello's coordination, the 3 families started questioning each other, looking for who'd leaked information, who'd betrayed whom. And at 4 in the morning, Luca made his final move. He called the coalition back, but this time his voice was different, strong, controlled, absolutely certain. "Gentlemen," he said into the phone on speaker so Mara could hear, "I have a counteroffer. You have until sunrise to remove your men from my mother's property. In exchange, I won't burn your organizations to the ground for this insult." "You're in no position to make demands," one of them blustered. You have my mother locked safely in her panic room, annoying your men with complaints about ruining her garden." Luca's smile was audible. "What you don't have is your command center, your coordinator, or any idea how thoroughly I've infiltrated your operation in the past 6 hours." Silence on the other end. Then carefully, "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the documents we copied from Costello's warehouse before we burned it. Names, accounts, operations, every dirty secret your coalition thought was secure. I'm talking about the 3 men you have inside my organization who've been feeding me information for the past year. I'm talking about knowing exactly which of you suggested this idiotic plan in the first place." Luca's voice went cold. "So here's what happens next. You leave. Now. You go back to your territories and stay there. You never threaten my family again.
And maybe, I let you keep operating in this city. And if we refuse, then I release every piece of information we copied. To the police, to the FBI, to your enemies, to anyone who'll pay for it. By tomorrow morning, you'll all be in custody or dead. Your choice." The silence stretched longer this time. Mara could practically hear the calculations, the fear, the desperate realization that they'd been outmaneuvered. "You're bluffing," someone said, but there was no conviction in it.
"Test me." 2 words. Absolute. Final. 5 minutes later, the men surrounding Sophia's brownstone began to withdraw. Security footage showed them loading into vehicles, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving nothing but tire tracks and broken fence posts to prove they'd ever been there. Sophia emerged from her safe room exactly 7 minutes after the last vehicle left, called Luca immediately, and delivered a string of Italian that probably blistered the paint off the walls. But underneath the fury was relief, pride, and something that sounded almost like approval. "Your wife planned this, didn't she?" Sophia asked. "This has her fingerprints all over it. Strategic, psychological, minimal bloodshed." "She did," Luca confirmed, looking at Mara with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She's been full of surprises." "Good. Keep her." Sophia's voice softened. "She's good for you, Luca. Better than you deserve, probably. Don't waste it." The call ended, leaving them alone in the conference room as dawn light started filtering through the windows. The city was waking up, completely unaware that a war had been fought and won while it slept. "We did it," Mara said, still processing. "We actually did it." "You did it." Luca stood slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. "I just followed your lead." I didn't do anything except suggest a plan. You executed it. Your people made it happen." "Our people," Luca corrected. "They're your people too now, Mara. Whether you planned it or not, you just proved you're not just my wife. You're my partner, my strategist, my secret weapon." The words should have felt like another cage closing. Instead, they felt like acknowledgement, like being seen not as property, but as person, not as prisoner,
but as partner. What happens now? Mara asked. With Costello? With the coalition? With Tony? Costello talks or he dies. The coalition stays in their territories or they join him. Tony, Luca paused. Tony gets a second chance. His sister is safe, his information was valuable, and he'll spend the rest of his life proving his loyalty or he'll die trying. Fair enough? More than fair? Mara moved to stand beside him, looking out at the city they'd just saved from war. And us? What happens with us? Luca was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I told you I could try to be someone you could tolerate, someone who makes this bearable. But standing here, watching you outmaneuver career criminals and save my family with nothing but psychology and strategy. He turned to face her fully. I don't want to be tolerable, Mara. I want to be worthy of the partnership you just offered, worth the faith you showed in asking me to be better. Luca, I know this started wrong. I know I forced you into a marriage you didn't want, into a life you never chose. I can't undo that. But I can try to build something real from the wreckage, if you'll let me. Mara looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly vulnerable man who'd bought her like property and somehow become someone she chose to fight beside. The past week had transformed her in ways she was still processing, from graduate student to crime boss's wife to something that didn't have a name yet but felt like power, like purpose, like belonging to something larger than herself. I'm still angry, she said honestly, about the wedding, about being sold, about everything that was taken from me. That doesn't just go away because we survived an attack. I know. But I'm also... She searched for the right words. I'm also starting to understand why you did it, not accept it, not forgive it, but understand the logic, the strategy, the cold calculation that said I was valuable enough to acquire. You're more valuable than I ever imagined, Luca said quietly. I thought I was getting a trophy wife, someone to smile at parties and make me look legitimate. Instead, I got someone who challenges me, who makes me think differently, who shows me that strength isn't just about violence and control. So what does that make us? Partners. Luca offered his hand, not a gesture of ownership this time, but of equality. Equals. Two people building something neither of us expected from circumstances neither of us would have chosen. Mara looked at his extended hand, at the scars on his knuckles and the wedding band that matched hers, at the man behind the monster everyone feared. She thought about her old life, safe, predictable, ultimately meaningless. She thought about what she'd become in just 1 week. Someone who could plan counteroffensives and stare down criminals and survive in a world most people only saw in movies. She took his hand. Partners, she agreed, but on my terms too. I'm not just following your lead anymore. If we're doing this, really doing this, then my voice matters. My strategies, my choices. Always, Luca promised. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood there as dawn broke fully over the city, hands clasped, partnership forged in violence and strategy, and the strange intimacy of survival. Somewhere below, Luca's organization was securing territory and interrogating prisoners and beginning the work of rebuilding what the coalition had tried to destroy. But up here, 25 floors above the chaos, two people who'd started as captor and captive were becoming something else entirely. Something neither of them had names for yet, but both recognized as real. The following weeks transformed the DeSantis organization in ways Mara never anticipated. With her input, Luca began restructuring how the family operated. Less fear-based hierarchy, more strategic loyalty. Protection instead of just intimidation. Investment in people instead of just extracting value. Tony became one of their most dedicated soldiers, his gratitude for his sister's rescue translating into the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought. Other members of the organization noticed. The whispers started. Mrs. DeSantis had a gift for seeing potential where others saw only problems. Costello broke after 72 hours of interrogation, gave up every name, every connection, every secret the coalition had tried to hide. The information was devastating, enough to dismantle 3 criminal organizations and hand Luca control of territories he'd been fighting for years to acquire. But instead of a bloodbath, Luca offered terms. Subordination instead of destruction. A place in his organization instead of war. Most accepted.
The ones who refused found themselves facing law enforcement with evidence packages that appeared mysteriously on prosecutors' desks. Mara watched him navigate it all with growing understanding. This was what Sophia had meant about real power, not the violence, but the strategy beneath it. The ability to turn enemies into assets, to build loyalty instead of just demanding obedience. She was learning, growing, becoming someone who belonged in this world not because she'd been forced into it, but because she'd chosen to master it. 6 weeks after the wedding, Sophia invited them both to dinner. The brownstone had been repaired, the garden restored, every trace of the coalition's siege erased like it had never happened. "You look better," Sophia told Mara, serving pasta with the same efficiency she applied to everything. "Not so much like a trapped animal, more like a woman who knows her worth." "I'm still figuring out what that worth is," Mara admitted. "No, you're not. You know exactly what you're worth. You're just learning to claim it." Sophia's eyes were sharp. "You saved my son's life, saved his organization, saved his soul, maybe, by showing him that strength doesn't always mean violence. That's worth more than gold, child." Luca reached under the table, found Mara's hand, squeezed once. A gesture of gratitude, partnership, something that was starting to feel like genuine affection. After dinner, they walked through the old neighborhood together. No security detail for once, just two people in the dark. Luca's arm was out of the sling now, healing well, and he moved with his usual predatory grace. "I've been thinking," he said as they reached a small park where streetlights created pools of gold in the darkness. "About the future, about what we're building. And I want to go legitimate, not all at once, that would be suicide, but gradually. Transform the criminal operations into legal businesses. Use the resources we've built to create something that doesn't require violence to sustain." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "I want to build something we can be proud of, Mara. Something that doesn't require you to compromise pieces of yourself to survive." The confession caught her off guard. "That would take years, decades maybe. And you'd have to fight your own people every step of the way." "I know, but I have the best strategist in the city helping me plan it." His smile was genuine, warm, nothing like the cold calculation she'd first seen at the altar. "If you're willing." Mara thought about her old dreams, graduate school, research, a quiet life studying criminal psychology from a safe distance. None of that seemed real anymore, seemed important anymore. She'd learned more about criminal organizations in 6 weeks living inside one than she ever would have from textbooks. "I'm willing," she said, "on one condition." "Name it. We start a foundation. Use some of those resources to help people like Tony's sister, people caught in situations they didn't choose, threatened by forces they can't fight." Mara's voice grew stronger. "We can't undo what's been done, but we can maybe prevent it from happening to others." Luca pulled her closer, and this time Mara didn't resist. She let herself lean into his warmth, into the solid reality of partnership built from impossible circumstances. "Deal," he said. "We'll call it the Sophia DeSantis Foundation. Mama would love having her name on something legitimately good for once." They stood there in the darkness, two people who'd started as enemies becoming something far more complicated and genuine. The city hummed around them, traffic and distant sirens, and all the chaos of urban life continuing unaware that the power balance had shifted, that the DeSantis organization was transforming from within. "I don't forgive you," Mara said quietly, honestly, "for forcing this marriage, for taking my choice. That's always going to be there between us." "I know. But I'm choosing this now, choosing you, choosing us, not because I have to, but because I want to." She looked up at him, saw her own complicated feelings reflected in his dark eyes. "That's worth something, isn't it?" "It's worth everything." Luca's hand came up, cupped her face with the gentleness he showed more and more often now. "I don't deserve the choice you're making, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." When he kissed her, it was different from the mechanical press of lips at their wedding ceremony. This was real, wanting and tenderness, and the fierce complexity of two people who'd fought their way to partnership through violence and strategy and sheer stubborn will. Mara kissed him back, choosing connection over distance, partnership over resentment, future over past. She'd never get back what had been taken from her. But standing in the darkness with a man who'd become her equal instead of her captor, she discovered something unexpected. She didn't want her old life back anymore. This new life, dangerous and complicated and built on foundations that would have terrified her 6 weeks ago, was hers in a way nothing else had ever been. Hers because she'd fought for it, survived it, mastered it. Hers because she'd chosen to stay not out of fear, but out of power. They walked back to the brownstone hand in hand, made plans with Sophia for the foundation's first initiatives, drove back to the penthouse that was finally fully repaired. The master bedroom looked exactly as it had before the attack, all evidence of violence erased. But everything was different now. The bed wasn't a battleground anymore. The penthouse wasn't a prison. Luca wasn't a captor. He was a partner, an equal, someone who'd learned to listen instead of just command, to value her mind as much as her appearance, to see her as essential rather than ornamental. Mariquin DeSantis, because she'd decided to keep both names, her history and her present intertwined, fell asleep that night wrapped in silk sheets in Luca's arms, planning their next moves in the campaign to transform his empire into something that served instead of just extracted. She'd been sold into this marriage. That truth would never change. But she'd chosen to stay, chosen to fight, chosen to build something real from the wreckage of forced vows and impossible circumstances. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. The foundation launched 6 months later, funding shelters and legal aid and escape routes for people trapped in situations they couldn't control. Tony's sister was the first person they helped. Full scholarship to college, security detail until Costello's remaining allies were neutralized, a future that was hers to choose. The legitimate businesses followed, slowly transforming blood money into clean investments. Real estate, technology, import-export companies that actually imported and exported legal goods. It took 3 years to fully transition, 3 years of careful negotiation and strategic repositioning, and occasionally still necessary violence against those who couldn't accept the change. But it happened. The DeSantis name became associated with philanthropy as much as fear, with building instead of just breaking, with partnership instead of domination. And through it all, Mara stood beside Luca, not behind him, not beneath him, but beside him as equal. The wife who'd been bought became the partner who'd been chosen. The prisoner became the architect of transformation. She never forgot how it started, never pretended the foundation wasn't tainted by how they'd met, but she also never stopped building something better from the wreckage, never stopped pushing Luca to be more than the monster his father had trained him to be. They were dangerous together, strategic, powerful in ways that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with understanding how to read people, how to build loyalty, how to transform enemies into allies. And somewhere in the transformation of his empire, in the building of their foundation, in the late-night planning sessions and the fights and the reconciliations and the choosing each other again and again, they fell in love. Not the fairy tale kind, not the kind that erased the violence of their beginning or pretended their hands were clean, but real love, complicated and hard-won, and built on mutual respect and genuine partnership and the understanding that they'd both been changed by what they'd survived together. On their 5-year anniversary, Luca took her back to the church where it all began. The same sanctuary, the same altar, but different circumstances entirely. "I know we can't redo this," he said, standing where he'd stood when she'd walked down the aisle in a dress she didn't choose. "I know I can't take back forcing you into vows you didn't want to say, but I wanted to ask you something I should have asked 5 years ago." He pulled out a small box, opened it to reveal a ring that was nothing like the ostentatious platinum and diamonds he'd given her at their wedding. This was simple, elegant, a single emerald set in gold. "Mariquin DeSantis," Luca said, and his voice shook with an emotion he'd learned to show instead of hide. "Will you choose to marry me? Not because you have to, not because of debt or obligation or strategy, but because you want to. Because you choose this. Choose us. Choose the life we're building together." Mara looked at the ring, at the man kneeling in the church where he'd claimed her as property, and somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. She thought about this past 5 years, the violence and the strategy and the slow transformation of monster into partner. She thought about the foundation bearing Sophia's name, about the businesses they'd built, about the empire they'd transformed. She thought about choice, about power, about becoming someone she never imagined through circumstances she never wanted. "Yes," she said, taking the ring from the box and sliding it onto her finger beside the platinum band she'd never removed. "I choose you. I choose us."
I choose this life we've built from impossible beginnings. Luca stood, pulled her close, and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Maybe they were. The only two people who could understand what they'd survived, what they'd built, what they'd become. The church was empty except for them. No witnesses this time, no armed guards, no fathers paying debts with daughters. Just two people choosing each other with absolute freedom and absolute certainty. They left together as they'd entered, hand in hand, partners, equals, and walked out into the sunlight of a life they'd fought for and earned and chosen every single day. It wasn't the ending Mara would have written 5 years ago, back when she was just a graduate student studying criminal psychology from safe distance, but it was hers. Completely, absolutely, undeniably hers. And in the end, that was all that mattered.